Xiao Ran chatted with Leah for a while longer. She was indeed the only one here who went into the sea to fish, as no one else's abilities were suitable. She was a beast type, able to breathe in seawater, but the others couldn't. Even if they weren't afraid of freezing to death, breathing was a huge problem. So, she was responsible for fishing, while the others performed their respective duties, searching for supplies in the vicinity. However, they didn't dare venture into the urban area, and the surrounding resources were extremely limited. As a result, their lives were very hard, which led some to lose hope and urge Li Xuanqi to enter the city, or at least move to a place closer to it. Xiao Ran shook his head. This settlement seemed detached from the world, but it was held together entirely by Li Xuanqi's personal prestige and charisma. Firstly, this couldn't last. Secondly, if anything happened to Li Xuanqi, morale would surely collapse, and the group would instantly disintegrate. He had no intention of meddling, much less getting involved in other people's affairs. That night, everyone came out for dinner. It was distributed equally. Whether an ability user or an ordinary person, the amount of food received was about the same. Xiao Ran could see clearly through his spatial perception that several people were secretly showing looks of dissatisfaction. It seemed this settlement would fall apart even sooner than he had anticipated. If you rigidly enforced egalitarianism and ate from a big pot, you were bound to arouse dissatisfaction in some. This wasn't the Jing'an settlement, where a group of soldiers was in power, possessing a strong sense of responsibility and cohesion, allowing the military and civilians to share weal and woe. Here, it all depended on Li Xuanqi's personal reputation, forcing ability users to live the same hard life. Many didn't dare to object openly, but they were undoubtedly extremely resentful inside. This was also because they didn't know the Black Dragon Society had been wiped out, and of the 6 major factions, some were destroyed and others had fled. Haidu was now completely devoid of powerful ability users and factions. Otherwise, many would have surely packed up and left. Stay here and suffer? I have superpowers, and I still have to suffer like an ordinary person? Who would do that? Xiao Ran secretly shook his head. This team was just waiting for the last straw to break. He continued to watch everything with a detached attitude, without interfering, nor any interest in doing so. In the apocalypse, the most interesting thing was always the human heart. They had only been eating for a short while when someone stood up and said, "Principal, shouldn't we go into the city to investigate?" "That's right," someone immediately echoed. "It's been so long. Maybe those factions have all killed each other off. We have so many ability users now, we wouldn't lose in a fight. All we do here is eat fish, and we don't even get enough to eat. If this continues, we'll all starve to death. We might as well go back and take a chance," more people chimed in. "Yeah, even if we don't go back to Haidu, we could go to other cities." Faced with the clamor, Li Xuanqi frowned. He knew this day would come, he just hadn't expected it to be so soon. He stood up and said, "You all think we have a lot of ability users, enough to fight factions like the Black Dragon Society, don't you?" "Yes." Everyone nodded, many rubbing their hands together, eager to try. What was the point of having great power if you didn't use it? Besides, why could the Black Dragon Society do as they pleased, but they couldn't? They were ability users now, too. Li Xuanqi sighed and said, "I originally didn't want to tell you this, but now I have to. It's true, you are all ability users. However, there are also differences in strength between ability users." "We know," the crowd nodded. "Some got big golden snowflakes, some got small ones, but how big can the difference be?" Li Xuanqi shook his head. "Wrong, all wrong. Besides the golden snowflakes, there is another way to acquire abilities." Everyone was stunned, looking at each other. Then, many faces turned angry. "If there's another way, why didn't you tell us? Principal, you want to get stronger all by yourself, don't you? You're too selfish. Yeah, look at the times we're in. You only care about your own power. You're probably thinking you can suppress and enslave us forever, right?" In an instant, the crowd was in an uproar. They didn't stop to think about who had brought them here in the first place. If it weren't for Li Xuanqi's help, they might have frozen or starved to death days ago. How could they be shouting at him here? People, they were just like that. Xiao Ran watched with great interest. However, just as there were ungrateful people, there were also those who knew how to repay kindness. People like Leah and many others jumped out to speak up for Li Xuanqi. The two sides argued back and forth, locked in a fierce dispute. "Quiet!" Li Xuanqi suddenly roared, his voice rolling like thunder, instantly silencing all other sounds. He was a powerhouse with around 200 portions of energy. If everyone here attacked him at once, they would only be swept aside. Of course, Xiao Ran was not included in that calculation. With that shout, everyone shut their mouths. Li Xuanqi sighed and began to explain. The other way to absorb abilities is to kill an ability user and plunder the ability from their body. I know this because when I went out to search for survivors a few times, I encountered other ability users. They insisted on killing me, and I killed them in self-defense. When I checked their bodies, I ended up absorbing their abilities. Those ability users in the city are all locked in life and death struggles. They won't reason with you. Moreover, after so many days, those ability users have already become extremely powerful. If my ability wasn't so well suited for escaping, I probably would have died in the city long ago. After he finished speaking, the crowd fell into silence. The news was too shocking for them. So, besides the occasional falling golden snowflakes, they could become stronger through other means? By killing other ability users? They looked at each other, their once friendly companions suddenly becoming strange and sinister, making them feel wary. Li Xuanqi sighed again. He had kept this secret hidden precisely because he didn't want everyone to become suspicious of each other, eventually leading to a falling out. A clean break would be the best-case scenario. What if they started attacking each other to hunt for abilities? But he had no choice. The crowd's desire to leave and return to the city could no longer be suppressed, and he was forced to reveal this cruel truth. Factions like the Black Dragon Society are too powerful. Don't be fooled by our numbers. We might not even be able to defeat one of their core members. Li Xuanqi said. Everyone was speechless. This was a huge blow to them, but the eyes of a few were darting around, clearly hatching their own plans. Xiao Ran, however, turned his gaze to Li Xuanqi. Unlike the people here, Li Xuanqi had absorbed abilities, so he would definitely experience the side effects. So, how to get rid of them? He could endure it normally, but what about when the side effect flared up? Would he turn into a beast? A potential riot was suppressed by Li Xuanqi with just a few words. However, the fact that ability users could hunt each other for their powers, this Pandora's box, had been opened. The hidden danger was sown and could erupt at any moment. The next time the people's hearts were in turmoil, Li Xuanqi would be unable to control it, unless he became a dictator. But if so, the nature of this settlement would naturally change. Therefore, change was inevitable. In reality, survival of the fittest was more in line with reality. Unless this settlement became 100 or 1,000 times stronger, forming a powerful binding force like national law that could suppress all unstable factors. But was that possible? At least Li Xuanqi couldn't do it. The first military region might be able. Thinking of this, Xiao Ran couldn't help but frown. The voice of that Lieutenant Colonel Zhu from the daytime echoed in his ears again. This was a huge hidden danger. Xiao Ran hated unknown factors the most. I made a satellite call at the mansion too. If I was targeted back then Qingfeng Garden isn't safe either. Although I brought the phone with me, if those people are really determined to use force, couldn't they just divide their forces? Then, should I start the plan early? Xiao Ran had the idea of finding a cruise ship and making his home on the sea. Of course, he certainly wouldn't go into the deep sea, but would stay near the coastline. This way, people on land would be unlikely to travel so far, and anyone who saw it via satellite would just think it was an ordinary cruise ship, locked in the ice on the sea surface. For Xiao Ran, this task was not difficult. It's decided then. After dinner, everyone returned to their ice houses to rest. What entertainment was there to be had now? Xiao Ran waited. When a thick fog rolled in, he used spatial exchange to travel about 9 kilometers away. He expanded his spatial domain and quickly built an ice house, then lit a fire inside and put his phone down. If someone really followed the signal, he could then perform a counter-trace. He had plenty of phones. Then, Xiao Ran went to the port. He had scoured all of Haidu before in search of Kotaro Zawa and knew there were 2 cruise ships docked at the port. Naturally, they had long been deserted. It only took him a few minutes to get there. There were 2 cruise ships, one large and one small. Xiao Ran inspected them and decisively chose the larger one. The larger cruise ship had more and better facilities, including an indoor swimming pool. Well, this was Xiao Ran's bottom line. There had to be a swimming pool. He directly stored the cruise ship in his subspace. As long as the height and width did not exceed the 100 by 100 meter limit, Xiao Ran could store it even if it were 10,000 meters long. He left. He didn't go directly back to Su, but went to the nearby city of Songqing. It was also by the sea. He broke through the ice, released the cruise ship, and refueled it. Instantly, the engine started working. Xiao Ran only turned on the heating and lights for a few luxury rooms on the top deck. With the thick fog, no one could possibly discover it, and only turning on a few rooms was naturally to save energy. You have to remember, he had turned on the constant temperature for the swimming pool. How much power would that consume? Even so, the energy consumption far exceeded that of the mansion. Xiao Ran's energy reserves suddenly dropped to 1.5 years. Starting tomorrow, he had to search for energy sources vigorously, preferably finding an oil refinery. Xiao Ran thought to himself as he headed towards Qing Phone Garden. What was his speed? Songqing was a county-level city under the jurisdiction of Suqing, so how far could it be? A few minutes later, Xiao Ran was back at Qing Phone Garden. After such an explosive sprint, he was steaming all over, his body temperature and heart rate alarmingly high. Seeing him return, the women were both happy and curious. He was at home in the morning. How could he have left without a word and come back so late? Even if we were a bit excessive last night and squeezed you a little dry, you didn't have to run away from home, did you? Let's go. Starting today, we're moving to a new place, Xiao Ran said. Although the women were puzzled, seeing Xiao Ran's resolute expression, they naturally wouldn't and didn't dare to object. They could mess with Xiao Ran in bed, and at most he would just cry out a few times, but when the man made a decision for them to challenge it. Okay, everyone go pack up. Su Qingmei clapped her hands. In truth, there wasn't much to pack. They quickly gathered in the main hall. Xiao Ran took out 3 hovercrafts, linked them with iron chains, and called over Baozi and Baiyan. They set off that very night. The hovercrafts were slow, with a top speed of 40 kilometers per hour. It took them over 2 hours to finally reach the sea. Because the fog was too dense, even when they arrived under the cruise ship, the women couldn't see anything. It wasn't until Xiao Ran brought them onto the ship one by one that they discovered their new home was actually a cruise ship. Compared to the mansion, the cruise ship was obviously larger, with all the necessary facilities, and even more, like a casino and an amusement park. The women were very satisfied, even dreaming that one day, when the temperature returned to normal, they would sail this cruise ship around the world. Then you'd better learn how to sail a ship quickly, Xiao Ran said with a smile. The women smiled and pointed at Xia Chuqiu. With her here, sailing a ship is a piece of cake. Xia Chuqiu smiled faintly, a little bit proud. An idea struck Xiao Ran. He pulled Xia Chuqiu aside, told her about the call he received from the 1st Military Region during the day, and then said, "Can you perform a counter-trace?" "Give me the phone, I'll try," Xia Chuqiu said. He had left it in Haidu, but that was no problem. Xiao Ran was about to run to Haidu to get the phone, but then thought better of it. Wouldn't that expose the cruise ship's location? So he took Xia Chuqiu with him and went to Haidu together. With a passenger, Xiao Ran's speed wasn't as fast, and he didn't dare to run too quickly. What level was Xia Chuqiu at? She wouldn't be able to withstand such high speeds. Thus, it took them over half an hour to reach the ice house Xiao Ran had built. They went inside, and Xia Chuqiu began to fiddle with the phone. After a short while, she shook her head. First, they used encrypted communication. Second, I don't have control of the satellites. Otherwise, I could call them back and use the satellites to find them. Xiao Ran sighed and casually tossed the phone aside again. Now, he really could only wait for the people from the 1st Military Region to find him, so he could then counter-trace them. Let's go back. He was about to take Xia Chuqiu and leave. But Xia Chuqiu pulled him back, her large eyes bewitching with an indescribable allure. "It's rare for it to be just the two of us," the girl said, biting her lip, full of anticipation. Xiao Ran understood. He took out bedding from his subspace and spread it on the ice. The heat from the small brazier was enough for the 2 ability users to ignore the cold. "Just a hug," Xia Chuqiu said. A while later. "Don't let your hands wander, After their intimate moment, Xiao Ran took Xia Chuqiu back to the cruise ship. He didn't linger, leaving before dawn and returning to the ice house. Here, he could monitor the phone he had left behind. If Lieutenant Colonel Zhu sent someone over, he would naturally know at the first moment. Day broke. Xiao Ran discovered that as the fog lifted, a group of 6 people immediately set off together. Clearly, they hadn't taken Li Xuanqi's warning to heart and were determined to go to the city, unwilling to live such a hard life any longer. They might even have ambitions, wanting to plunder the abilities of others to make themselves stronger. After becoming an ability user, whether a physical type or not, one's physical fitness would improve significantly, especially for physical types. Having tasted such sweetness, who wouldn't want to continue getting stronger? For an ambitious person, this was even more significant. In the past, becoming a person of high status required money, power, and influence. Now, as long as your ability was strong enough, you could make people grovel at your feet. Just because they were survivors, did that mean they were all good people? How could that be? It was just that Li Xuanqi was strong enough before with high personal prestige, so no matter how great your ambitions, you had to endure. But now Knowing that ability users could hunt each other to become stronger, how could they hold back? Besides, they were also afraid that Li Xuanqi was deliberately fattening them up like pigs, waiting for the day they were ripe to slaughter them. It was better to leave quickly. First, to get away from Li Xuanqi. Second, to live a better life. And third, maybe they could become stronger quickly themselves. But there weren't many ambitious people. Only 6 had left. Xiao Ran didn't care. His main concern was to find out if Li Xuanqi was the culprit who harmed children. Soon, everyone came out of their ice houses one by one. It was only during the distribution of breakfast that they realized 6 people were missing. At first, no one understood, but when they learned that these 6 were the ones who most wanted to leave, they naturally figured it out. Everyone has their own aspirations. Li Xuanqi then said, "They left this morning. I heard their footsteps, but I didn't persuade them." He had already said what needed to be said yesterday. If these 6 people still insisted on leaving, why force them to stay? He was a physical type, with about 200 portions of energy, so his hearing was naturally incredibly sharp. Everyone sighed. Leah went to fish again, but she only succeeded once or twice out of 10 attempts. It was likely she would come back empty-handed again today. Xiao Ran sat in the ice house, waiting for both Li Xuanqi to go out and for the people from the first military region to arrive. They knew he had so many supplies. How could they just give up because he hung up the phone and ignore him from then on? Li Xuanqi prepared for a bit. Then he also went out, dragging that black canopied boat. If he wasn't the one harming children, then this man was truly a saint. Wu Shanglong was strong in his sense of responsibility, but he was different from Li Xuanqi. Xiao Ran followed him out, but kept a distance of 5 kilometers. Even with Li Xuanqi's sharp hearing, it would be impossible for him to discover someone was tracking him. With the ultra-wide perspective of his spatial perception, Xiao Ran discovered 2 ability users appearing near Li Xuanqi. They had just come out of a house, inside which lay the bodies of a couple. The woman had obviously been assaulted, her body covered in bruises, her expression twisted in agony. "Perfect. I'll use you 2 for an experiment." Xiao Ran immediately circled around. Whoosh, he vanished around a corner. "Bro, did you see a shadow over there just now?" One man with sharp eyes immediately nudged his companion. The other hadn't noticed, but since his companion said so, he said, "Let's go check it out." So they gave chase. Xiao Ran would flash into view from time to time, but always at a corner, never giving the 2 a clear look, while also appearing timid and furtive, obviously hiding. "Chase him! Chase him!" The 2 ability users got excited. To be able to be active outdoors for so long, this person was very likely an ability user too, but his strength was probably not high. Otherwise, why would he keep avoiding the 2 of them? That's about right. Xiao Ran smiled, used spatial exchange to enter a house, and sat back to watch the show. Sure enough, as the 2 ability users searched and searched, they happened to run straight into Li Xuanqi. "Ah, found you." The 2 ability users were first overjoyed, but then immediately realized something was wrong, because Li Xuanqi was dragging a boat. After the absurdity, it was of course time to get down to business. "You can hack into satellites again?" Xiao Ran asked. Xiao Chuchio was curled up lazily in the blankets, looking very tired. After a moment, she said, "Mitchum, I absorbed a golden snowflake earlier, and my power grew by a fair bit. My computational ability has skyrocketed. While I can't completely control the satellites, I've managed to gain some authority." Xiao Ran gave her a kiss. "Well done. Help me find a location of the first military district." "All right, let me sleep for a bit first. I don't have an ounce of energy right now," Xiao Chuchio said languidly. "Should I call teacher you over?" Xiao Ran chuckled, and his hands began to move. In less than 2 minutes, not only was Xiao Chuchio's sleepiness gone, but she was also full of vigor. She wrapped herself around Xiao Ran, nibbling his ear. "You bastard, can't you just let me get some proper sleep?" Xiao Ran roared with laughter. However, he hadn't woken Xiao Chuchio up just to fool around. Pinning the young woman's hands down, he said, "First, help me find the location of the first military district. I'll reward you after you're done." Xiao Chuchio rolled her eyes at him, but had no choice but to take the phone and start operating it. Countless characters flickered across her eyeballs at an astonishing speed. The phone screen also began to change on its own. A map application appeared, then it located and zoomed in. "It's right here," Xiao Chuchio said. Xiao Ran looked at the screen and saw a stretch of wilderness bordered by a mountain. But according to the map, there was nothing here. Forget a military district, there wasn't even a single ordinary residence in sight. This was normal. If any map software company dared to mark a military district, that company would have reached its end. Xiao Ran took a look. The first military district was a bit further northwest of Jinling, with a straight line distance of about 300 kilometers. A piece of cake. If he ran at full speed, it would only take him about 10 minutes. I'll go check it out later, but for now. Xiao Ran asked the women about their recent gains. Although they didn't have spatial perception, their strength was in their numbers. With nothing to do every day, they would put on white clothes and search the ice plains, especially when it snowed. They would immediately notify everyone to go look for golden snowflakes. There were indeed more golden snowflakes by the sea. Not only had they all evolved, but several of them had also harvested more than one golden snowflake, and their power levels were rising quickly. The one with the highest power level was now Su Qingmei, who was at about 40 portions. It couldn't be helped. She was a physical type with the sharpest senses and fastest speed. It was only natural that she discovered and found the most golden snowflakes. However, she didn't keep them all for herself, but also looked out for the weaker ones, voluntarily yielding them. This further enhanced her prestige, and all the women respected her. There was only one exception: Zhou Yunsu. The green tea sister never lost to anyone. Back in school, her rivalry with Su Xian had been fierce, and now she certainly wouldn't sit by and watch Su Qingmei get ahead of her. However, her method wasn't to win people over with virtue, but to focus her efforts on Xiao Ran. As long as Xiao Ran treated her well and doted on her, her status wouldn't fall, it would only rise. And she had also pulled in some allies. The women from the Qingcheng building faction and the Chong family mansion faction now looked to her as their leader, forming a counter against Su Qingmei's group. Gulong said that wherever there are people, there is a Jianghu, and it was truly so. It was said that a 6-person girls' dormitory could have more than a dozen group chats. With so many women in the house now, it was a good thing they couldn't use apps like WeChat anymore. Otherwise, Xiao Ran would be curious if they could create hundreds or even thousands of group chats. Xiao Ran was happy to see this situation. Competition was a good thing. At dinner, Xiao Ran was somewhat absent-minded. He was considering how to enter the 1st military district. Infiltrate with a fake identity? However, if Major Zhu was really from the 1st military district, then what he looked like was probably no secret. At least some people would know. It would be awkward for him to just stroll over there. It was like when he wanted to go undercover at Sister Qin's place. I at least need a disguise. A sudden idea struck Xiao Ran. Can I use my spatial domain to change my appearance? He had previously detached a person's arms and swapped them left for right before reattaching them. If he could do that, would a minor cosmetic surgery be difficult for him? No sooner said than done. Xiao Ran went to his room, opened his domain, and started the minor cosmetic procedure in front of a mirror. Adjusting his appearance was simple, but as soon as the spatial domain was withdrawn, his muscles seemed to have a memory, causing his face to quickly revert to its original state. Unless I maintain the domain constantly. Actually, that's not particularly difficult. He could now maintain his spatial domain for up to 97 minutes. He would only need it to get through the inspection. Afterward, he could wear a mask and a hat, and then he could revert to his original appearance. Feasible. Xiao Ran was a petty person. That Major Zhu had threatened him, so he had to teach the guy a lesson. And I need to know if the 1st military district has any operations targeting me. If they won't come to me, then I'll take the initiative. He said he was going out for a trip and might not be back for a few days, which made all the women very unhappy. You villain, didn't you say you were going to stay home for several days? They protested one after another. Xiao Ran could only give a wry smile. Isn't it because Chuchio's ability has improved and she helped me find the location of the 1st military district? Seeing all the women looking at her, Xiao Chuchio quickly said with a wronged expression, I was forced. The women were just protesting a bit. None of them were so tactless as to insist that Xiao Ran stay. Xiao Ran was the head of the family. His decision was the final will. Considering that this trip might take some time, Xiao Ran left behind a large amount of supplies. The women wouldn't normally contact him, unless something major happened. At Xiao Ran's current speed, as long as they could hold out for 10 minutes, he could likely return to provide support. Time to go. Xiao Ran didn't bring anyone with him. The plan to take Zhou Yunsu to collect energy would have to wait until he got back. He was dressed all in white, the best camouflage in the icy and snowy landscape, but Xiao Ran still used spatial exchange a few times before he started running. He didn't use his full strength. Running at full speed for more than 10 minutes made his body feel like it was on fire, which was very uncomfortable. Of course, he could run at full speed for half an hour straight if necessary. He had tried it, but the result was that his clothes would burn up from his high body temperature, and his skin would turn as red as fire, as if he had overloaded. He would then be in a state of difficult movement for a short period and would need to rest for more than 10 minutes to recover. Xiao Ran reduced his speed to 100 meters per second. At this state, he could run for 3 hours straight before feeling tired. Even so, his speed was an astonishing 360 kilometers per hour, comparable to the fastest high-speed trains. So, how long would the 300-kilometer journey take him? Less than an hour. Arriving at the corresponding latitude and longitude, the map showed this place as an empty area, and in the past, even if people came here, it would look the same to the naked eye. But now it was different. Huge signs, not just one, but many of them, visible long before reaching the entrance, all painted with arrows pointing this way, as if afraid people wouldn't be able to find it. The signs all read, "Spark City welcomes you," in 6 characters, followed by an arrow pointing the way. Spark City? A single spark can start a prairie fire? Xiao Ran secretly nodded. Right now, the whole country, no, all of humanity, needed a single spark to ignite the hope of mankind. At the end of the arrows was a sloping tunnel leading underground. It was very wide, and the thick snow around it had long been shoveled away, making it extremely conspicuous. This tunnel must have been closed in the past, with turf and other camouflage, making it impossible for even a satellite to capture anything unusual. But now, there was no camouflage. It was openly displayed. Using his spatial perception, Xiao Ran saw the underground portion, a massive underground city. He was actually not far away, but his spatial perception couldn't encompass the entire underground city. Due to the distance, his perception of the city under the city couldn't be maximized, but it still covered an area of about 5 kilometers long and 4 kilometers wide. Even so, this was not enough to capture the entire underground city, which showed its vastness. However, Xiao Ran could also see very clearly that the entire underground city was divided into 2 distinct parts. The central part was all reinforced concrete, clearly built with modern equipment, while the remaining part was very rough, with only makeshift wiring to maintain basic lighting. Obviously, the main part of this underground city was built before the cataclysm, so modern craftsmanship could be seen everywhere. But it had been expanded after the cataclysm, and due to the lack of sufficient materials, the construction could only be very simple. It had been just over 100 days since the natural disaster. To expand an already large underground city by so much in such a short time was clearly not the work of ordinary people. There were many people in the underground city, and they were a diverse crowd. There were soldiers on guard, police on patrol, office workers and laborers sweating in factories, people from all walks of life, basically a scaled-down version of a normal city. Xiao Ran did not approach, but walked around the underground city, and more parts of it imprinted themselves on his mind. The underground city also had farms, ranches, and poultry farms, a scene of thriving prosperity. Just from his quick tour, Xiao Ran roughly estimated that the population of the entire underground city was no less than 20,000. This number was staggering. However, for such a huge underground city, the energy consumption must also be astonishing. But there were no power plants now. Could there be such factories underground? Taking a step back, even if there was a power plant, where would the energy come from? It's not like they could conjure up coal and other things out of thin air. Soon, Xiao Ran discovered the city's power source. Nuclear energy. This underground city actually had a miniaturized nuclear reactor. No wonder. With nuclear energy, a single refueling could generate how many kilowatt hours of electricity? Clean and efficient. This underground city had considered many situations from its inception and was very likely prepared for a potential world war in. Even if a nuclear war broke out worldwide, this place could preserve a spark for China. One day, when the contamination disappeared, the Chinese nation could recuperate and step by step restore its former glory. However, Spark City was probably not designed to accommodate so many people initially, so it had to be expanded now. Xiao Ran then carefully checked the strength of every Esper in the city. If anyone's power level was higher than his, he would definitely change his mind and turn around and leave immediately. He was just here to check the situation and issue a warning. He didn't intend to cause trouble, but no one should come looking for trouble with him, or he would absolutely not be polite. The current strongest person had a capacity of about 1,000 portions. They were definitely not weak, but they were far inferior to the big shots in Haidu, and in front of Xiao Ran, they were not enough. But this person was not the leader here, which was strange. The real number one figure was sitting in a large office, constantly busy with official duties. People who came in to report work all called him Secretary Tang. He only had a power level of about 300 portions. Good, time to infiltrate and see. Xiao Ran smiled. Although he had a mission on this trip, he saw it more as a game. With enough strength, one could be this confident. The gains from the battle in Haidu were truly immense. Xiao Ran changed into a different outfit, a black windbreaker, which was particularly conspicuous in the snowy environment. This was also intentional. He strode towards the entrance of the underground city. At the entrance, there were soldiers with live ammunition. They immediately gestured with their hands for Xiao Ran to stop. Then, a soldier who looked like a captain saluted Xiao Ran and asked, "Are you here to seek refuge in Spark City?" Xiao Ran smiled slightly. "Yes." The captain's face broke into a smile. "Welcome, welcome. Please come over and register first." "No problem," Xiao Ran agreed. The registration form was simple, only requiring a name, age, gender, and the most important one, whether he was an Esper. The name Xiao Ran used was Sunlimin. He couldn't use the name Xiao Ran, as anyone with a mind for it would immediately associate it with him. Although he wasn't afraid of a fallout, since he was treating this as a game, it was better to conceal his identity as much as possible. This Spark City showed Xiao Ran that even if a natural disaster struck, there was still hope for humanity to rise again one day. He would not be a lone wolf in the future. He was quite looking forward to this. So he really didn't want to make a move against the people of Spark City. Too many people had already died in this world. If he was going to fight, he would fight the Japanese, the Koreans, the Western Devils, and so on. Age, 25. He really wanted to put 18, but decided to have some shame. Gender? Male. Esper? Yes. Seeing Xiao Ran check the box for Esper, the captain said, "An Esper, eh? I'll have Xiao Zhang take you to the Esper registration center in a bit. The people there will guide you through the rest of the procedures." "Okay, thank you," Xiao Ran said with a smile. "Xiao Zhang," the captain shouted loudly. "Here," a young soldier responded, puffing out his chest. "Take this person to the Esper registration center." "Yes, sir." The soldier then wheeled out an electric scooter and said to Xiao Ran, "Hop on." "Hey, a bit interesting." The soldier named Xiao Zhang drove Xiao Ran into the underground city. Xiao Ran tried to get information out of him, but unexpectedly, Xiao Zhang's lips were very sealed. He either claimed not to know or refused to answer on the grounds of discipline. The electric scooter quickly drove into the underground city. Instantly, a magnificent underground city appeared before Xiao Ran. Even though Xiao Ran had already seen it through his spatial perception, seeing it with his own eyes still left him with a look of shock. Part of it was an act to give the impression of a newcomer seeing it for the first time. The height of the underground city reached 60 meters, a single level of 60 meters, equivalent to a 20-story building. Walking inside, one felt no sense of oppression at all. On the contrary, there was a feeling of one's own smallness. In such a space, buildings rose from the ground, but only 3 reached a height of 50 meters close to the dome. The others were generally around 30 meters, which highlighted the grandeur of the underground city, filling it with an epic feel. Xiao Zhang rode his little electric scooter and dropped Xiao Ran off in front of a large, but not very tall, building of only 3 stories. "Let's go. I'll take you inside," Soldier Xiao Zhang said. Xiao Ran obediently followed him. To fully understand this place, it was best to integrate into it. There weren't many people here. Soldier Xiao Zhang led Xiao Ran into an office where there was only one person, a woman with glasses, about 30 years old, with an ordinary, unremarkable appearance. "Sister Ma, this is a newcomer who just arrived today," Soldier Xiao Zhang said, handing over Xiao Ran's simple registration form. The woman with glasses looked Xiao Ran up and down, first took out a camera to take a picture of him, and then started printing it. As she did, she said, "Sunlimin, right? Please sit down. I'll ask you a few simple questions first." "Okay," Xiao Ran sat down. "What type of Esper are you?" "Physical type." "Oh, then I'll arrange for a blood sample to be taken later to determine your power level through cell strength." "Okay." At this point, the photo was printed. Sister Ma pasted it onto Xiao Ran's registration form and stamped it with a seal that had a number on it. 3229527. This is your identification number. The old ID numbers had too many digits and are meaningless in these times. 32 is the unified code, and you are the 29,527th resident of our Spark City. So your number is 3229527, Sister Ma said. "Hell, what a number." Sister Ma then said to Soldier Xiao Zhang, "All right, you brought him here. I'll take care of him from now on." "Okay, then I'll be going, Sister Ma." Soldier Xiao Zhang replied and turned to leave. Sister Ma called another person over to take Xiao Ran for a blood test. Xiao Ran was very curious and asked, "Is the technology so advanced now that it can even measure power levels?" "Yeah." The person, a young man named Lu Weicheng, said, "I really envy you Espers. If only I could get some evolution fluid one day." "Evolution fluid?" Xiao Ran was taken aback. It's that golden snowflake, have you seen it? Lu Weicheng said. After we collect these snowflakes, we preserve them. They have two uses. One is for ordinary people like us to evolve into espers, and the other is to be distributed to you espers to make you stronger. However, for either use, you need enough contribution points to exchange for it. Xiao Ran smiled. Contribution points? MHM, for contributions to Spark City, to humanity. Lu Weicheng nodded, his face serious. This is the most dangerous time for our country and our nation. Everyone must make a contribution to help as many people as possible survive. Then, after the disaster passes, we will be the fastest to recover. Xiao Ran was somewhat surprised, staring at Lu Weicheng for a moment. Your awareness is truly high. I can't compare to you. This was the honest truth. He only thought about self-preservation, his bottom line merely being not to do evil. But this didn't stop him from admiring people like Wu Shanglong and Li Shuangqi who were truly willing to make sacrifices. If this Spark City was truly a lamp in the darkness, then Xiao Ran was at least willing to coexist peacefully with it. We're here. They arrived at a simple laboratory. Lu Weicheng called out, and a young girl came out from an inner room. When she saw Xiao Ran, her eyes couldn't help but light up, because Xiao Ran had pinched his face to be super handsome. A handsome guy, and an esper on top of that. In this day and age, wasn't that the equivalent of rich and handsome, the ultimate golden bachelor? Take off your pants, the young girl blurted out, but after the words left her mouth, her face turned bright red, and she stammered, No, not that. I mean roll up your sleeve. Can't you draw blood from my finger? Xiao Ran asked. The temperature is quite low. It's hard to draw blood from the finger. The young girl finally sounded a bit more professional. All right then. Xiao Ran rolled up his sleeve. The young girl tied a tourniquet on him, but when she touched his explosive muscles, she couldn't help but get a starstruck expression and even gave him a pat. After Xiao Ran glanced at her, her face filled with an expression of social death. She lowered her head and just focused on drawing blood, not daring to look at Xiao Ran again. After collecting the blood, the young girl took it for testing. The needle was specially made, otherwise it would be impossible to pierce an esper's skin. Xiao Ran supervised the whole process. If the girl had tried to secretly keep his blood, he would have immediately used spatial exchange to take it away. Fortunately, she used all the collected blood for the tests. At least 7 tests were done. No wonder they needed to draw so much blood. Wait for half an hour, the young girl said, too embarrassed to come out and face him. Xiao Ran then chatted with Lu Weicheng. Unlike soldier Xiao Zhang, Lu Weicheng's mouth wasn't so tight. It might have been because Xiao Ran's joining Spark City was a done deal, so he didn't think to hide anything, telling him almost everything he knew. And much of this information was something Xiao Ran should know anyway. Spark City had 2 leaders. Secretary Tang Fengyuan, who was in charge of the city's livelihood and administration, and General Shi Shoujing, who controlled the army and was responsible for external defense. Therefore, Spark City could be roughly divided into 2 factions. Don't look down on Tang Fengyuan for not having soldiers. He was actually in charge of the police. It was just that when it came to the number of espers under his command, Tang Fengyuan had a few less, as the main use of espers was for combat. Espers who joined Spark City had several options. First, join the army. Second, join the police force. Third, join the engineering corps, which mainly focused on expanding the underground city. This tended to recruit physical type, beast form, and earth type espers. Physical types were for moving things, as they were strong. Earth type espers were very suitable for excavation. Beast form espers had both qualities, being strong and possibly having powerful digging abilities. If one didn't choose any of the first 3, they could also do civilian work, such as making clothes, raising pigs, or growing vegetables. The wages for such work were lower. A civilian's monthly wage was no more than 300 spark coins, but an esper started at 500, a rather large gap. After half an hour, the results came out. S rank. S rank. The young girl's exclaimed voice was heard. She didn't come out but picked up her phone and entered some data into a strange app. In less than 20 seconds, a man in a military uniform walked in. My name is Cheng Yao, captain of the Special Forces team. The burly man, who was about 185 centimeters tall, said very seriously. He seemed to be a grim-faced enforcer, unable to squeeze out a smile. Seeing Xiao Ran's dazed expression, Cheng Yao explained, The Special Forces team is part of the military. Our duty is to protect Spark City and expand its territory. Xiao Ran couldn't help but shudder and looked at Cheng Yao. Although it was the apocalyptic end of days, China was still China. Expanding Spark City from its current size to cover the entire country couldn't be called expanding territory. Unless Xiao Ran was slightly excited. Did Cheng Yao mean to charge out of the country, conquering south and north? A fine idea. He couldn't help but click his tongue. People were truly different. Both were soldiers, but Wu Shanglong was more focused on protection, while this Cheng Yao was inclined towards offense, towards establishing immortal achievements. A pity. My main purpose this time is to investigate the situation. For now, I won't be joining you to trample on Tokyo or kick the Koreans. Before Xiao Ran could refuse, another person arrived. This person had a very festive look. He was short, only about 1.6 meters, but very fat, so his whole body had a round, rolling feel. Combined with the exaggeratedly long mustache on his upper lip, he looked a bit like a groundhog. Little son, he called out loudly. You haven't agreed, have you? You haven't agreed yet, right? Seeing Cheng Yao's displeased expression, this groundhog smiled. My humble name is Zhang Qingbei. When I was young, my family had high hopes for me, wanted me to get into either of those two top universities. But I didn't even get into high school and left home early to work. However, every profession has its masters. I was a model worker in my unit, great at operating excavators, and I've trained a whole group of outstanding apprentices. As long as you're contributing to the country's development, any post or educational background is the same, right? He was very enthusiastic and well-spoken, and his festive appearance immediately closed the distance between them. This was something the scowling Cheng Yao, who looked like everyone owed him money, couldn't compare to. Xiao Ran's face darkened slightly. He should have known not to use the name Sun Li Min. Being called Little Sun made him feel like he was from the grandson's generation. Cheng Yao frowned. Sun Li Min's cell strength has reached S rank. His strength is comparable to mine. If he doesn't join our special forces team, is he supposed to follow you guys digging mud every day? Zhang Qingbei said with a serious face. Captain Cheng, are you looking down on our engineering department? Indeed, you all work diligently to protect Spark City, but are we not contributing when we add bricks and tiles to the city's construction? Cheng Yao frowned again. You know, I don't mean that. Your engineering department is indeed contributing to the city's construction, but Sun Li Min is more powerful. It's a waste to give him to you. He wasn't good with words, and a perfectly normal statement was seized upon by Zhang Qingbei for a round of criticism. Zhang Qingbei was here to snatch him, and he immediately said, Isn't it better that he's strong? More and more people are coming to Spark City now. Our engineering department is already short-staffed, and the construction schedule has been postponed several times. We need excellent talents like Little Sun to join us. He turned his head and smiled at Xiao Ran. Little Sun, join our engineering team. I'll give you 2,000 Spark coins a month. That's even higher than my own salary. Think about it. Even an Esper's starting salary was only 500 Spark coins. 2,000 was indeed very high. Cheng Yao snorted, his dissatisfaction growing stronger. The army had its own strict rules. He couldn't just randomly offer a high salary to attract Xiao Ran. This made his fists itch, and he looked at Zhang Qingbei with a very unfriendly gaze. If he really made a move, Zhang Qingbei would have no choice but to take a beating. Although Cheng Yao was a physical type, which somewhat affected Xiao Ran's judgment, this person's strength was not even comparable to Duan Chang's back then. Before absorbing Sister Qin's powers, Strong Devil's energy was probably around 1,500 portions, 2,000 at most. So, Cheng Yao's energy should be around 1,000 portions, and he was also the strongest person in the entire Spark City. From this perspective, Spark City was far inferior to the 6 major powers of Haida back then. In Xiao Ran's opinion, this amount was more normal. There were only so many Espers, and after killing each other, how many portions could be concentrated in one person? So, were there fewer golden snowflakes falling in this place? What about Zhang Qingbei? He wasn't a physical type, so it was easy to judge his power level, which was about 200 portions. Not weak, but completely outmatched by Cheng Yao. Yet he dared to compete with Cheng Yao for a person. What did that mean? Cheng Yao was a person of great discipline. Otherwise, with his strength, let alone turning the Spark City into his private domain, he could have done very well elsewhere. Wouldn't it be great to be his own boss? Not only did he not do that, but he also didn't use his own strength to suppress Zhang Qingbei. From this point of view, this person's principles were terrifyingly strong. I'm not late, am I? Another person walked in. He was wearing a police uniform. Although his figure was not as tall as Cheng Yao's, he was about 180 cm. He actually looked 5 parts similar to Cheng Yao, but his face was not as dark, and he was much more handsome. Hello, my name is Cheng Shun, the man said with a smile. pointing at Cheng Yao. He's my older brother, but he's always been dissatisfied with me because I chose to be a policeman instead of a soldier. Cheng Yao immediately sneered. A real man joins the army. Cheng Shun decisively did not argue with him. The two had been arguing about whether to be a soldier or a policeman for many years. Was there any result? People have their own ambitions, so naturally, neither could persuade the other. He said to Xiao Ran, "Join our police force. The salary may not be as high as the engineering teams, but it's not as tiring. And you don't have to run out every other day like the Special Forces team. Our workload is relatively light. Join us. I'll give you the top salary, 1,000 spark coins. In addition, I'll also try my best to get you a spot for evolution fluid. I should be able to get you about 10 portions a month." For espers, was salary really that important? If they didn't have enough money to buy supplies, couldn't they just go out and find them themselves? But evolution fluid was different. It wasn't something you could find just by looking. It required luck and strength. What if you encountered a stronger opponent and ended up feeding them your powers instead? Looking at it this way, Cheng Shun's offer was very sincere. Cheng Yao sneered. "Sun Mean, follow me. I'll take you to Japan to kill devils. Evolution fluid? You can have as much as you want." As expected, old Cheng's talk of expanding territory meant going abroad to fight. "I admire you." Cheng Shun, however, frowned. Secretary Tang said that right now, everything must be centered on construction so that Spark City can accommodate more people. Don't always be thinking about making a name for yourself. Have you forgotten what happened up north? It's only been 3 days. What happened up north? Xiao Ran pricked up his ears, but the Chung brothers, Old Chung and Young Chung, did not continue the conversation on this topic. Cheng Yao just snorted. "This natural disaster is very strange. Right now, we can obtain evolution energy by killing people, but who knows if that will change. Maybe one day, we won't be able to obtain evolution energy after killing an esper. So, if we don't take this opportunity to go kill some devils and strengthen ourselves as much as possible during this period, what will we do if a group of powerful enemies comes to kill us on a day when we can no longer plunder powers?" Hearing what Cheng Yao said, even Xiao Ran was moved. Killing espers and plundering their powers seemed natural to him. He had never considered that it might suddenly become impossible one day. Could happen? Who the hell knew? This extreme weather was caused by those mysterious cosmic rays. To say it was science, it was actually quite metaphysical. To say it was metaphysical, many aspects could still be explained by a scientific perspective. What if one day, killing an esper truly couldn't yield any powers? Was this just the initial primitive accumulation, and in the future, one would have to rely on golden snowflakes? For a moment, Xiao Ran's thoughts drifted. Hey, you guys are too fast." A pleasant voice came, and a woman swayed in with her beautiful figure. She was about 30 years old, full of mature charm. Perhaps she had given birth, as her waist was no longer so slender, but she was very full-bodied. Tui, I'm a decent man." Xiao Ran coughed inwardly. Looking again, this woman had an impressive bust, reminding Xiao Ran of a line of poetry. "When I stand on the highest peak, all other mountains will look small." Of course, the woman also had a very pretty face, worthy of her curvaceous figure. She wasn't a back-view killer. The beautiful, mature woman gave Xiao Ran a charming smile. That kind of flirtatious charm could truly make one infatuated. She probably has a charm-related ability, Xiao Ran said to himself. Otherwise, Han Yun, who was of the same type, was far more beautiful, charming, and mature than her, but hadn't given him such a strong fantasy. This showed that this woman must have an ability that enhanced her charm. Sure enough, Cheng Yao was a true steel-straight man. He immediately snorted and said coldly, "Mei Yuping, cut it out." The beautiful, mature woman glanced at Cheng Yao and giggled. "Captain Cheng, you're so fierce. I suspect you'll have a hard time finding a wife in this lifetime." Then, she turned to Xiao Ran and said, "My name is Mei Yuping, and I'm the head of the logistics department. Handsome, you know how many perks there are in the logistics department. And I have many pretty young girls under me. If you join the logistics department, I'll introduce all of them to you. Which one you can woo is up to your skills." She took a different approach, not promising Xiao Ran a high salary or evolution fluid, but starting from a physiological angle, offering to solve his future worries. Cheng Yao was annoyed again, and with a stern face, he said, "Mei Yuping, watch your words. This is a government department, not an entertainment club." Of course not, otherwise Captain Cheng Jr. would have already led a team to crack down on prostitution. Mei Yuping's seductive smile remained. She turned to Xiao Ran again and said, "Come on, Join our logistics department. I guarantee you'll be off the singles market within a month." If Xiao Ran were just an ordinary wandering esper, he might have been genuinely moved. But with a flock of beauties at home, he had a very high resistance and immunity to the temptation of women. These days, do you even need to woo girls? With a display of my baller status. Nah, by dropping a ton of cash, wouldn't at least 1 in 10 put out? Xiao Ran's mind raced. What was he here for? First, to confirm the situation. Second, if the first military district really had its eyes on his supplies, then he would have to handle it based on the circumstances. If the leader of this city was an ambitious schemer, he would not hesitate to kill him. Conversely, he would show off his strength a bit to make them back down. Since that was the mission then, Xiao Ran smiled. I choose to join the police force. After becoming a police officer, he could reasonably question everyone. Combined with his own observations using spatial perception, he would gain a comprehensive understanding of the future direction of this Spark City. Then, he would decide whether to fight or just flex his muscles. Seeing Xiao Ran make his choice, Cheng Yao, Zhang Qingbei, and Mei Yuping all showed disappointment. Actually, Zhang Qingbei and Mei Yuping were fine. They didn't particularly need a powerful esper. But Cheng Yao was different. He truly needed one. He had always wanted to launch an eastern expedition, first taking down Japan, then pushing north to annex the peninsula. Then, depending on the situation, he would consider whether to continue north and take down Russia. From there, he could enter North America to the east or take Europe to the west. Sun Li Min, think about it again. He made a final persuasion. Now is the best time to expand the country's territory and eliminate all the foreign enemies that threaten us. In the words of Duke AI, it is a crime in the present generation, a merit for 1,000 autumns. We will bear the infamy of a generation, but our descendants can live without worry forever. If we don't get rid of the little devils now, when the international order is re-established in the future, there will be no chance. The great Captain Cheng looked at Xiao Ran with a fiery gaze. Sigh, if I weren't here on a mission, I would have joined you to kill a few little devils. But not now. Old Cheng, there will be a chance. Xiao Ran shook his head. I still choose to join the police force. Cheng Yao was stunned for a moment and didn't try to persuade him further. He just nodded and turned to leave. People have their own ambitions. What could be done? Zhang Qingbei and Mei Yuping also left one after another, while Qing Shun happily led Xiao Ran away. First, he reported to the police station and completed the onboarding process. He then received a police uniform in his size. After changing, he looked quite dashing. It feels strange for someone like me to wear a police uniform. Fortunately, it's just a disguise. Xiao Ran smiled. Cheng Shun briefly introduced him to the work. Although Spark City's population was not large, equivalent to about 3 large communities in the past, the people were particularly mixed. And because a large amount of past data had been damaged or lost, it was impossible to know each person's specific identity. It was possible that there were very bad people from the past who had now transformed themselves and blended into the crowd, waiting for an opportunity to commit crimes. This had indeed happened, and more than once. There were still several serious cases that had not been solved. Their duty was to maintain daily public order and also to solve cases. Xiao Ran nodded. This was even better. He could conduct investigations openly. Here, this phone is for you. Our city has full wireless signal coverage. You can connect to the local area network anytime, anywhere to check information and facilitate communication, Cheng Shun said, handing him a phone. Well, this city does have some talented people. Xiao Ran took the phone and couldn't help but wonder if the people who set this up were related to Major Zhu. After explaining a bunch of rules and regulations to him, Cheng Shun got up and left. Xiao Ran's treatment was good. He had a separate office. He turned on the phone. There were several special apps on it. For example, resident information. This was good. He opened it to check, but all he could see was information on ordinary people, name, age, gender, and their current job in the city. But when he tried to view the files of people like the Chung brothers, he was prompted with insufficient permissions. What was there to see in the files of ordinary people? A thought struck him, and he pulled up the unsolved cases. There were a total of 4 unsolved cold cases, and all were of the same type. The victims were all young, beautiful women. The difference was that some were raped before being killed, while others were killed and then their bodies were raped. The killer's tastes were very twisted. However, the method of murder was the same for all victims. Their throats were slit by a steel wire, so it was inferred to be the same killer. But to this day, the killer had not been found. The underground city had too many surveillance blind spots, especially outside the old district, where the conditions were simple and only electricity was available. The only thing the police could do was to increase patrols on one hand, and on the other, to ask residents to avoid living alone as much as possible. Xiao Ran just glanced at it and moved on. He didn't need to analyze the cases. He just had to open his spatial perception. If the killer struck again, he could immediately run over, literally run, without needing to use spatial exchange, and easily take them down. But how could he forget the purpose of his visit? He immediately went out and started asking people questions one by one. Of course, he started with the cases, but as he asked, he steered the conversation towards the city's power structure. The secretary Tang was named Tang Fengyuan. Before the cataclysm, he was a high-ranking provincial official. He happened to be here for an inspection when the disaster struck, and he was trapped. Fortunately, Spark City was designed from the outset to cope with a possible nuclear war, with large reserves of energy, food, and other necessary living supplies. Therefore, Tang Fengyuan and his group were able to survive here. And Cheng Yao was a soldier stationed here. He was the first to awaken his powers. Later, when the poisonous hail stopped and the fog cleared during the day, Tang Fengyuan had the army go out to bring people from the city, which led to the increasing population of Spark City. Gradually, more people completed their evolution, and the appearance of golden snowflakes further expanded the scope of evolution. With more people came more talent. The Science and Technology Department also emerged and was studying the nature of this cataclysm, and most importantly, trying to crack the secret of the evolution fluid. If they could achieve artificial synthesis. TSK. Of course, they hadn't achieved artificial synthesis of evolution fluid yet. They had only managed to preserve it for about a month, after which it would start to lose energy and eventually become completely ineffective. This was their only progress. Xiao Ran was very disappointed by this. It could only be preserved for a month. He just needed to put an esper or a golden snowflake into his alternate space, and it wouldn't lose energy for 100 years, let alone a month. He only said 100 years because a person's lifespan is limited. But Xiao Ran felt that after humans evolved, their vitality had greatly increased, possibly changing humanity at a fundamental level. Lifespans should far exceed 100 years. He could only guess, as the cataclysm had only been 4 months ago, so how could he know how much his lifespan had been extended? Tang Fengyuan was a capable official before the cataclysm, skilled in development. After the cataclysm, he also dedicated himself to the people's livelihood, trying to use Spark City as a core to ignite the sparks of a nationwide revival. But because of this, his philosophy was completely opposite to Cheng Yao's. Cheng Yao advocated for external attacks. The sea was now completely frozen, so no ships were needed. They could point their swords at Japan. With the speed of espers and a small amount of rations, they could complete a landing in Japan within 10 days. Using Japan as a springboard, they could advance towards the peninsula. If the 4th Military District then cooperated by sending troops, they could complete the occupation of the peninsula. His philosophy was as he had said before. He would rather this generation bear a lifetime of infamy to let future generations enjoy happiness. A typical radical. Moreover, if you don't take the initiative to attack, what happens when Japan's forces are completely unified and they attack first? Although Japan is small, its population is not, with over 100 million people. How can it be underestimated? The key is that they're an island nation, surrounded by the sea, so the chances of getting golden snowflakes are naturally high. Therefore, if they don't take down Japan quickly, there will be great trouble in the future. Xiao Ran deeply agreed with Cheng Yao's thoughts. Japan is poor in resources, so the little devils in history always wanted to leave Japan and invade the resource-rich China. They just couldn't do it most of the time, but in modern times they almost succeeded. Although they were defeated, did the little devils repent? No. They only regretted not succeeding and were summarizing their failures, not repenting for the disaster, destruction, slaughter, and harm they brought to us, while still worshipping war criminals. A dog can't change its ways of eating shit. Once I saw the problem here, I must go to Japan as soon as possible. Cheng Yao's speculation that killing people might not yield powers in the future is likely not his personal idea, but a conclusion reached by the researchers here. I can't let my guard down. If a strong expert really appears in Japan, and I can't get stronger by plundering powers, having to rely only on golden snowflakes, then a comeback would be too difficult. Xiao Ran believed he would have no problem protecting himself. Banishment plus spatial exchange gave him a chance to retreat safely even when facing an esper stronger than himself. Since self-preservation was not an issue, shouldn't he do something else? From the current information, this Tang Fengyuan is not a bad person. Under his leadership, the development of this city will only get better and better. All right, fine, Major Zhu. Give him a warning, and then I should leave. Get to Japan early, before they really produce some super expert. Xiao Ran finished his investigation and returned to the accommodation assigned to him. He sat down idly, his spatial perception open, monitoring the entire Spark City. No detail could escape his perception. But monitoring such a large area with nearly 30,000 people was extremely mentally taxing for Xiao Ran. He soon felt his head start to throb. No, the workload is too great. He would only look for women with the surname Zhu. After spending some time, Xiao Ran actually found a woman with the surname Zhu who belonged to the Science and Technology Department. But she was clearly not a major because military ranks were no longer popular here. For example, Cheng Yao's position was captain of the Special Forces team, not a colonel or general. This woman was just an ordinary member of the Science and Technology Department, not a major at all. The moment the woman spoke, Xiao Ran was certain. She was that Major Zhu. Her full name was Zhu Qingxian. Her name was quite nice, and her looks were not bad either, young and sweet. It was just that her figure was a bit lacking, belonging to the petite and delicate type, no taller than 1.6 meters, with small breasts, completely not to Xiao Ran's taste. He liked them tall and big. Spark City was underground, so of course there was no distinction between day and night. But humans are intelligent beings with a sense of time, so the city still followed a normal schedule. Work during the day, sleep at night. Xiao Ran decided to wait until everyone was resting, then use spatial exchange to take Zhu Qingxian away, give her a slight punishment, and also a warning to Spark City. They should never mess with him again. Otherwise, if he could easily take Zhu Qingxian today, he could of course take anyone in the future. But before it got dark, someone came over first. It was Mei Yuping, and she was bringing a young girl with her. What was Mei Yuping here for? Before Xiao Ran could think too much, knock, 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 the door was already being knocked on. He heard Mei Yuping's voice. Little son, are you there? Little son again. Xiao Ran sighed. He shouldn't use the name Sun Li Min in the future. It was a bit of a disadvantage, always feeling like he was being called by a diminutive befitting a grandson. He went to open the door, feigning some surprise. Director Mei, just call me Sister Mei, Mei Yuping said with a smile, naturally squeezing through the door. Let me introduce you. This little girl is named Liang Yu. Although she's not an esper, she's beautiful. Isn't she? Look, isn't she a great beauty? Are you sure you're not a madam? Xiao Ran was speechless. Liang Yu, on the other hand, blushed deeply and said shyly, Sister Mei. Ooh, high-level skills. Xiao Ran had spatial perception. To check the girl's background, he had naturally used the enhanced version. Not only did he clearly see Liang Yu's cell strength, but he also saw the dark. If this woman didn't have a kill count of over 100 men, Xiao Ran would write his name backward. But it was undeniable that this Liang Yu was indeed very beautiful. She was 172 centimeters tall, with long, straight legs, a full chest, and a round bottom. Only her waist was slender. Her figure was very alluring. Her overall score was around 85, definitely a great beauty, just shy of being top tier. However, let alone being a little shy. Even if she were truly top tier, Xiao Ran had seen plenty, so why would he be unable to move his legs? Mei Yuping continued. Why don't you two try dating? All right, I still have things to do. Little son, I'm leaving little Liang with you. You better not bully her. After saying that, she didn't give Xiao Ran a chance to return the goods and ran out the door. Xiao Ran was speechless. This Miss Liang had already slain 100 men. The number of cocks she'd had was probably more than the number he'd seen. Who was bullying whom here? Sister Mei, don't go. However, Liang Yu blushed and tried to pull Mei Yuping back, but was pushed back by her. You two chat. Mei Yuping had a doting anti-smile on her face. This woman must have run a matchmaking agency before. Mei Yuping left, and Liang Yu was at a loss for what to do. After a while, she finally said, Big brother son, I've never had a boyfriend, so I don't know what to do. Big brother son, I'll listen to whatever you say. High level. Xiao Ran couldn't help but praise her in his mind. This woman first claimed she had never dated, implying she was as pure as could be. What man wouldn't like that? Even if one didn't have a virginity complex, the fact that she had kept herself chaste and pure was a plus, right? In the next sentence, I'll listen to whatever you say, was even more suggestive. A pure and beautiful woman saying this to you. How could you not be moved? Xiao Ran smiled. Since you like to pretend and act, fine, I'll play along with you. He said with a straight face, You want to date me? Liang Yu looked shy, but still nodded. Indeed, she had heard from Mei Yuping that Xiao Ran's test evaluation was S rank, comparable to Cheng Yao. Now, it was the era of espers, Although Spark City was still governed by law for now, she believed it wouldn't last long. Eventually, espers would be kings. If she could latch onto Xiao Ran's thigh now, then when the day of esper supremacy came, she would naturally be set. So, when Mei Yuping, in an attempt to poach him, specifically chose her to stage a honey trap, she only feigned a little coyness before shyly nodding. In fact, even if Mei Yuping hadn't chosen her, she would have tried to pounce on him herself. Xiao Ran nodded. The first step in a relationship is to be completely honest with each other. Take off your clothes. Huh. Liang Yu was eager to establish a relationship with Xiao Ran on the same day and secure her position as Mrs. Sun. She certainly didn't mind sleeping with Xiao Ran, and she had already thought of an excuse, that she had lost her hymen because she was an avid athlete. But who asked someone to take off their clothes right off the bat? A man who could say such a thing. Could he be any good? Could she expect him to be responsible after he was done with her? He would definitely be the type to leave without a second thought. Liang Yu forced a very strained smile and said, "Big brother son, you really know how to joke." Huh. I'm not joking, Xiao Ran said with a smile. Hurry up. Hurry up. I've never played with such a beautiful girl before. This guy must be a psycho. Liang Yu shivered in fear and quickly said, "Big brother son, I suddenly remembered I have something to do. I'll be leaving first." Didn't Sister May just bring you here? What could you possibly have to do? Xiao Ran said, pretending to reach out and grab her. Liang Yu was scared to death and quickly fled out the door. She wasn't afraid of having a relationship with Xiao Ran, but of being used for free. Before the cataclysm, her rate was 10,000 yuan a time. She refused to be a freebie. After Liang Yu ran away, Xiao Ran couldn't help but laugh out loud. This woman would probably go and slander him to Mei Yuping, right? It didn't matter. He wouldn't be staying here for more than a few days anyway, and Mei Yuping wasn't his superior. She couldn't control him. Xiao Ran stretched and lay down on the bed. The conditions here weren't great. The bed, for example, was a simple folding type. The advantage was that it was easy to transport and move, but in terms of comfort, it was lacking. This was a shelter, after all, originally built to cope with a possible nuclear war. Everything was based on survival. As long as one could stay alive and keep their life, enjoyment was naturally secondary. Human adaptability is really strong. Although the cataclysm had only begun a little over 4 months ago, the people here had completely adapted. They each did their own work, and even the espers were diligent and conscientious, completely unlike in other places where they were high and mighty, lording over the common people. But how long could this last? In Xiao Ran's opinion, the current stability of Spark City was entirely because Cheng Yao and a group of powerful espers had no ambition, or rather, had a strong sense of mission. Otherwise, if they were to seize power and rebel, who could stop them? The emergence of espers was destined to shatter the old social structure. There was a gap between people. They were not born equal. It was like an elephant and an ant. How could you talk about equality? Thinking too much, Xiao Ran smiled. He had no interest in enslaving others. He just wanted to guard his own little plot of land and live a carefree life with his beautiful women every day. Above the underground city, the sun gradually set, and the fog appeared like a mystery, quickly shrouding the land. Xiao Ran did not act immediately, but waited until it was almost 2 in the morning. Then he used spatial exchange, and whoosh, he was on the snowy plains. He then locked onto Zhu Qingxian, threw out a playing card, and whoosh, in the next moment, a woman with an ungraceful sleeping posture appeared in front of him. It was Zhu Qingxian. The underground city was very warm, but outside it was around -70 degrees. The extremely low temperature immediately made Zhu Qingxian shudder and wake up. She was greatly alarmed. How could she suddenly be on the snowy plains while sleeping soundly? When did I become a sleepwalker? We finally meet, Major Zhu. A mocking voice rang out, making Zhu Qingxian jump in fright. She had only ever introduced herself as Major Zhu to one person. But how could this person have found her, and even take her from the city? Were the army and police in the city just for show? Xiao Ran, she asked tentatively. The wind was bitingly cold, and she was shivering violently. An esper's physical constitution was indeed much stronger than an ordinary person's, but this Zhu Qingxian only had about 10 portions of power. Moreover, she had been sleeping and was not dressed warmly. The cold wind was bone-chilling. It was a good thing she was an esper. Otherwise, she would have frozen to death long ago. Xiao Ran showed no trace of pity. He asked coldly, "Weren't you the one who wanted me to hand over my supplies?" "Hith, I'm here or no. Let's see how you make me hand them over." Zhu Qingxian cleared her throat and said, "Xiao Ran, do you know what you're doing? We represent the people. We represent the government. Don't go further down the wrong path." It seems you still don't understand the situation. Xiao Ran laughed, reached out, grabbed Zhu Qingxuan's ankle, and held her upside down. Ah! Zhu Qingxian cried out in alarm. Not only did her black hair hang down, but her face was also covered by her nightgown. She was terrified. She wasn't in the habit of wearing underwear, finding it too restrictive and stuffy. She was really only wearing a nightgown. Being held upside down like this, of course, everything was exposed to Xiao Ran. She was a beauty, after all. If Xiao Ran saw her body, would this guy get horny and do something to her? Xiao Ran was unmoved. Zhu Qingxian was a 70 at best, and her chest was so small. He had absolutely no interest. I'll ask, you'll answer. If you displease me, I'll just throw you back into the city like this, understand? Xiao Ran said. Zhu Qingxian was overcome with shame and anger, yet she didn't dare to make any harsh remarks. She could only use her hands to cover herself as much as possible, her voice trembling. I understand. She was about to cry. Heh, you were pretty brave when you were threatening me, weren't you? Are you really a major? Xiao Ran asked. No, Zhu Qingxian said with a sob in her voice. I just made up that identity to scare you. Heh, how did you know my number? Xiao Ran asked again. My ability is to hack electronic devices. I found your register number through a satellite, Zhu Qingxian quickly said. Similar to Qiao Xining's subordinate. This kind of ability is so annoying. Xiao Ran complained to himself before asking again. It's been many days since you made your threat. Why haven't you taken any action? This was what he didn't understand. Were they not interested in billions worth of supplies? Were they that magnanimous? Zhu Qingxian gave a bitter smile. Because a major incident happened up north, so we decided not to provoke you for the time being. Up north? Xiao Ran thought of the conversation between the two Chung brothers during the day, and a thought struck him. Tell me in detail. Can you put me down first? I promise to answer all your questions. Zhu Qingxian was about to explode from embarrassment. Xiao Ran casually tossed Zhu Qingxian to the ground. You'd better, or else he... Zhu Qingxuan's face was flushed red. In her heart, she was naturally cursing Xiao Ran from head to toe. Although she had had several boyfriends and was not a virgin, being so naked in front of a strange man was still too humiliating. But she only dared to curse him in her heart. She didn't dare show any dissatisfaction or resentment on her face. She collected her thoughts and calmed her emotions, gaining a new understanding of Xiao Ran's power. She had been in the city, yet she was taken out so stealthily, without alerting anyone. What did that mean? He was powerful, terrifyingly powerful. It was a good thing something happened up north, and they hadn't sent people to find Xiao Ran. Otherwise, they would have been completely wiped out, and might have even provoked this monster to retaliate. The day after I called you, a major incident occurred up north, in the 4th Military District, she began to explain. Before Xiao Ran could show any dissatisfaction, she quickly elaborated. A monster appeared up north. A real monster. I'm not lying to you. It was over 50 meters tall. Not only could armor-piercing rounds not break through its hide, but it could also spew super low-temperature streams of air from its mouth. Even espers couldn't withstand it. The 4th Military District emptied its arsenal. Except for not using a nuclear bomb, they used every other weapon they had to kill that monster. Our 4 major military districts are all in contact. According to news from the 4th Military District, there is likely more than one such monster. So, our current mission is to eliminate any potential monsters that might appear, not to be your enemy. Xiao Ran was speechless, and to think he had been monitoring Haidu for several days, yet no one had come looking for him. A monster? 50 meters tall? That was a bit of an exaggeration. Indeed, beast bodies would grow larger after mutation, but the leopard, Baiyun, had only grown to the size of tiger. How many times larger was that? Let's say 10 times. So, the monster that appeared up north was 50 meters tall. Before its mutation, it must have been at least 5 meters tall. A giraffe? Do you know what species it was? Xiao Ran asked. Zhu Qingxian. According to the analysis, it should be an ape. What an ape? Xiao Ran was stunned. What kind of ape could grow to 5 meters tall? And that was the minimum. Did it absorb too much evolution fluid, causing its body size to grow out of control? Armor-piercing rounds couldn't even break its skin. How thick must that monster's hide be? Fortunately, the firepower of an entire military district was able to eliminate that monster. But there were more like it? No wonder the 1st Military District hadn't come to bother him. Facing the beast that could pop up at any second, making a powerful enemy right now would be a seriously dumb move. Xiao Ran, however, became interested in this kind of monster. Most importantly, what did this monster eat to grow so big? Boom! Just then the earth trembled slightly. Even though the fog was thick and you couldn't see more than a meter away, a startling light still rose up, shooting up to an unknown height. This was definitely not thunder, but an explosion. Xiao Ran couldn't help but feel a jolt in his heart. He looked at Zhu Qingxian. Don't tell me that was a nuke? Zhu Qingshuan's face was also pale. She shook her head. I don't know, but somewhere in the distance, a terrifying explosion had definitely occurred. The earth itself had trembled, and a bright light was visible even through the thick fog. If that wasn't a nuke, what other weapon had such power? Xiao Ran frowned. After warning Zhu Qingxian, he had originally planned to leave. But now, a strong curiosity suddenly arose in him. If this was really a nuclear explosion, what caused it? The safety measures for nuclear weapons were definitely top-notch. It was impossible for them to explode due to lack of maintenance. So, it must have been used by someone. Against whom? Xiao Ran wanted to find out. Therefore, he decided to stay here at least until tomorrow morning to see if the first military district satellite could capture anything. Remember today's lesson. If you ever try to mess with me again, it won't be this simple, Xiao Ran said, turned, and walked away. After a few steps, he used a spatial exchange to return to his room. Time to continue sleeping. Xiao Ran slept soundly, but Zhu Qingxian suffered. Could you go back now? Of course not. The fog was thick, and she had no idea which way was north, south, east, or west. Moreover, she didn't know she was actually right above the underground city. Maybe with some luck, she could wander around for a while and find the entrance. She just stayed where she was, shivering from the cold. The weather was extremely cold, and she was only wearing a nightgown. Even though she was an esper, she was freezing. She wouldn't die, but if she stayed like this until dawn, she would definitely get sick. It was already good that he didn't kill her. A night passed. Xiao Ran woke up, stretched, and felt full of energy. However, he was soon called over by Cheng Shun, who told him to increase patrols. What happened? He asked deliberately. Cheng Shun sighed. We were infiltrated last night, but we were completely unaware. So, starting today, the intensity of patrols will be doubled. Xiao Ran said, oh, and walked around the city at will. He appeared to be on patrol, but his attention was actually on Zhu Qingxian. The woman had returned after dawn and immediately reported to her supervisor. Then, Cheng Yao led a team out to search, hoping to get lucky, while Cheng Shun was responsible for conducting a search within the city. Zhu Qingxian had also reported what she saw last night, a suspected nuclear explosion somewhere. This naturally attracted absolute attention. After confirming via satellite phone, it was certain that a major incident had occurred in the 4th Military District, because only the 4th Military District's phone line was unreachable. Because of this, there was no time for Zhu Qingxian to make any psychological adjustments. She immediately sat down, first finding out which satellite was currently over the 4th Military District. After finding it, she used this satellite to take pictures and transmit them back. Before long, a stack of photos came out of the printer. Xiao Ran saw clearly. The photos showed only a field of ruins, but in the ruins there was a skeleton. It was unknown what kind of creature it belonged to, as it was too badly damaged, and its blood and flesh had even been vaporized, leaving only a skeleton. But the bones are not white but black like iron. A single photo couldn't determine the size of this creature, but next to the remains was a tank that had been more than half melted. With a comparison, it was very obvious. In front of this skeleton, the tank looked as small as a toy. Xiao Ran estimated that this creature should be close to 200 meters tall. No, not close, but definitely 200 meters because this was just a skeleton, so its real size must have been even larger. A 200-meter-tall monster? Xiao Ran hissed. Was this thing a marine creature before? Otherwise, how could there be a creature at least 20 meters tall on land? Zhu Qingxian said that a 50-meter-tall ape-like monster had appeared near the 4th Military District before. With this preconceived notion, Xiao Ran felt that the remains of this monster looked very much like an ape. Crap, so the previous one was just a baby? They killed the baby, and now the mother came for revenge? That's not right. The cataclysm had only been a little over 4 months. Not to mention how long it takes for an animal to get pregnant and give birth, even if it could be born in such a short time. Could it grow so big? That's too exaggerated. Or did the whole monster family mutate collectively? Xiao Ran listened to the conversation of the others in the room. He was no expert in biology or weaponry, so it was better to listen to what others had to say. Sure enough, everyone was as shocked as he was. After a long while, the head of this department picked up his phone, used some unknown app to make a voice call, and after it connected, he immediately said, Secretary Tang, I have a major discovery here. I must report to you immediately. Oh, you're coming over in person. Good, good. I'll wait for you. A while later, Tang Fengyuan appeared. Secretary Tang, we've lost contact with the 4th Military District. From the satellite images, we suspect that a supergiant monster attacked there, forcing the 4th Military District to use a nuclear weapon to perish together with the monster, this supervisor reported. Tang Fengyuan's expression froze. He was silent for 2 seconds before asking, "Can you confirm this?" "We can basically confirm it." Tang Fengyuan slammed his fist down. If it weren't for this thick fog seriously affecting communications, even if the 4th Military District had used up all its missiles, as long as they could have notified us in time, we could have also launched missiles to help them deal with the monster. Everyone was silent. The fog had only affected visibility at the beginning, but later it had also affected communications, and it was getting worse. So, when the 4th Military District was attacked by that terrifying giant beast at night, they were completely unable to send out a message or request support. In the end, they had to detonate a nuke, perishing together. Secretary Tang, we have reason to believe that the monster that previously attacked the 4th Military District and this one are of the same species. The supervisor gritted his teeth and said, "We believe this one is the fully mature form, and the previous one was just a subadult. And, look," he pointed at the picture, "this monster should have been in the central area of the nuclear explosion. Even if it wasn't directly hit, it would have endured a high-temperature shock of tens of thousands of degrees. The tank next to it melted so much. Logically, under such high temperatures, any living creature would be directly vaporized. But this monster still retained most of its skeleton. It's truly terrifying. If they evolve further, will they be able to ignore all our weapons?" Hearing his judgment, everyone's faces turned very grim. If even nuclear weapons were ineffective, how could humanity compete with such a monster? Even Xiao Ran frowned. If even a nuke couldn't kill it, how could such a being be eliminated? An alternate space? But the problem was, the monster was 200 meters tall. Even if it ran into the spatial gate on its own, it wouldn't fit, unless it crawled in. That seemed impossible no matter how he thought about it. A headache. Fortunately, this terrifying giant beast was killed by the 4th Military District in a mutual destruction. Otherwise, if this giant beast had destroyed the 4th Military District and then headed south, who could have stopped it? Xiao Ran rubbed his temples, looking very troubled. There was nothing much in the subsequent conversation from Tang Fengyuan's side, so he stopped paying attention and turned his focus to the two Qing brothers. Yesterday, they were at odds, as if there was no brotherly affection between them, but now they were whispering to each other, with no sign of a falling out. That guy just arrived yesterday, and in the middle of the night, Zhu Qingxian was abducted without anyone noticing. That's too much of a coincidence, Cheng Yao said with a straight face. Cheng Shun was not so serious. He smiled. What if it really was just a coincidence? The elder Cheng glared at him. His cell strength is S rank. The key is, in our intelligence, that Xiao Ran should be a space type. We reached the S rank conclusion based on a physical type, but if Sun Li Min is really Xiao Ran, then that conclusion is completely wrong. This person's power is unfathomable. Been locked in the little black room, suffered heavy losses. Please grant this author life with free clicks and support. Cheng Shun couldn't help but grin. If Sun Li Min is really Xiao Ran, and this person is so powerful, you still want to make a move on him? Cheng Yao just glanced at him, his gaze full of contempt. We soldiers guard the nation's gate and protect the people's safety. This is our duty, he said in an unquestionable tone. As long as it's proven that he poses a threat to Spark City, I will find a way to lure him out, entangle him, and then use missiles to kill him. You're crazy. Cheng Shun grabbed his collar. You'll die too. A one-for-one trade, not a loss, Cheng Yao said with a calm expression. A soldier's destiny is to die on the battlefield. It's a worthy death. That's why I didn't become a soldier. You guys are all a bunch of crazies. Why are you so stubborn? Cheng Shun was so angry he was hopping mad. Can't I just assign him a mission, send him to a certain place, and then launch a missile strike? Cheng Yao shook his head. An esper of his level has too strong a sense of danger. The moment the missile arrives, someone has to hold him down, otherwise he could definitely escape. When the 4th Military District used missiles to bombard that small giant beast, didn't all the masters go up together to hold it down so it couldn't escape? At a time like this, if we don't go up, who will? There was only determination in his eyes, no fear at all. Even Xiao Ran was a little impressed, but his face also darkened a bit. Did I fucking kill someone or commit arson? First of all, you guys came after me first. Over 3 billion in supplies. You said to donate just like that. Isn't that a joke? Secondly, I only abducted Zhu Qingxian in the middle of the night to warn her. I didn't even torture her. What's wrong? Now you're going to judge me as a great villain? If I were really a bit more extreme in my thinking and heard your conversation and went on a killing spree, would you too bear the blame for the annihilation of the entire Spark City? Sometimes, good people and smart people are not the same, and they can even be synonymous with foolishness. He needs to be woken up. With a thought, Xiao Ran's domain opened, and with a single teleport, he appeared in front of the two Chung brothers. He was using his original appearance. Xiao Ran. The two Chung brothers exclaimed simultaneously. They had obviously seen a photo of Xiao Ran. Chung Yao was a physical type, and his reaction was a bit faster. Almost instinctively, he clenched his right hand into a fist and swung. Chung Shun was only slightly slower. He actually lunged at Xiao Ran, his entire body flattening out as if he were about to become a giant piece of chewing gum to envelop Xiao Ran. A very strange ability. However, no ability was effective against Xiao Ran. With his domain open, he was a god. After all, the power gap between him and the Chung brothers was too large. Xiao Ran just smiled, and the two brothers were instantly frozen in place. It was truly as if time had stopped. They couldn't move a muscle. But looking at Xiao Ran, he casually sat down to one side, took out a bottle of Coke from thin air, and started drinking. Then he crossed his legs and said, "I say, you two, am I on some wanted list? Or am I some criminal caught in the act? Why are you two so eager to kill me?" Their secret conversation had actually been overheard by Xiao Ran. This shocked the two Chung brothers and further confirmed Xiao Ran's power. He had eavesdropped on their conversation, and the two of them were completely unaware. Was that suddenly mean your disguise? Unexpectedly, Chung Yao's first sentence was a question back to Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran laughed. "Do you two think you're qualified to question me? Forget it. I know you have backbone, and I can't be bothered with nonsense. I have no conflict with you. As long as you don't mess with me, I won't bother you. After all, we're all fellow countrymen." Captain Chung, I quite agree with your view. Now is the time to expand the country's territory. So, save your energy for fighting abroad. Don't waste it on your own people. That's all. Don't come looking for me. I'm afraid you might try to nuke me one day. So, if I find you searching for me, I really won't be polite. Also, I'm very interested in that giant beast. Find out where they came from as soon as possible. I'll come back in a while. I hope you'll have some results by then. Goodbye. Xiao Ran waved his hand and was about to leave, but he took a step and stopped. By the way, Captain Chung Jr., I found that rapist murderer. He lives at D4-221, a single man named Li Bianqing. His strength is average, but his ability is a bit special. He can turn into a shadow to move. That's why you could never find him. I guess I've made a contribution. In the next moment, he disappeared. Thump. The Chung brothers immediately regained their ability to move and instantly collided with each other. Fortunately, they realized something was wrong in time and both withdrew their strength. Even so, the collision was quite forceful. But neither of them cared about the pain. They looked at each other and could see deep apprehension in the other's eyes. They were so helpless in front of Xiao Ran. No, they couldn't even make a move. Chung Yao's face was especially dark. He had even said he would hold Xiao Ran down for a mutual destruction. But Xiao Ran didn't even bother with empty words. He just used one move to tell him that the only one dying would be him. Chung Shun felt much the same. The killer they had been unable to find. Xiao Ran had solved the case in just one day. Was Xiao Ran just talking nonsense? Probably not. Since Xiao Ran could secretly listen to their conversation, how hard would it be for him to detect that killer? Anyway, this time, Xiao Ran had slapped him in the face hard. "Are you still planning to nuke him and die together?" Chung Shun asked faintly. Chung Yao rolled his eyes at him. "Do you think I'm a fool?" "A little bit." Chung Shun nodded honestly. Chung Yao ignored him and said with a bitter smile, "Although this is humiliating, if Xiao Ran were really a villain, why would he bother warning us? Wouldn't it be better to just kill us and absorb our powers?" So, just as he said, he doesn't want to cause trouble, and he doesn't want to turn his blade on his own people. Even a civilian has such awareness. Are we soldiers not even as good as him? Wait, I'm not a soldier. I'm a policeman. Don't you dare lump me in with you. Chung Shun quickly clarified. Chung Yao rolled his eyes at him. You still have the mood to joke at a time like this? For now, focus on the potential giant beasts, he said solemnly. Xiao Ran is a person, and he can be reasoned with. But the monsters can't. Imagine. Chung Shun also became solemn. On the snowy plains, Xiao Ran smiled slightly, and only then did he truly leave. His earlier departure was just an act for the Chung brothers to see. He wanted to see their true thoughts. This result was good. Time to go home. Xiao Ran returned home, relieved. A little over an hour later, the cruise ship was in sight. As he got closer, swoosh, he used spatial exchange and entered the vessel. However, his spatial domain's radius had now reached over 97 meters. A little more growth, and it would catch up to the maximum distance of spatial exchange, or even surpass it. Then, Xiao Ran would be able to open his spatial domain and teleport directly. It would be faster, and there would be no need for an exchange object. Seeing Xiao Ran's sudden return, the women were naturally overjoyed. They had thought he would be gone for at least 10 days to half a month this time, never expecting him to come back so soon. In response to their questions, Xiao Ran gave them a rough account of his trip to the first military region. When he mentioned Liang Yu, all the women rolled their eyes, their faces filled with contempt. She's obviously a green tea, so pretentious. Her skills are far worse than the little green teas. Before Xiao Ran could even detail what had happened, the women had already reached a conclusion. Not bad, not bad. You've all become green tea connoisseurs. Zhou Yunsu was particularly disdainful. That's a bitch. Can you please not insult the word tea? Xiao Ran smiled and continued his story. When he described how he had scared Liang Yu into fleeing in disarray, the women couldn't help but smile, quite satisfied with Xiao Ran. When he spoke of the giant beast's appearance, the women's expressions changed. Heavens, such a terrifying creature actually existed. The ape was only so big. How could it turn into a 200-meter-tall giant beast? Could it be King Kong? King Kong couldn't even block bullets. How could it possibly require a full missile barrage to be killed? The women discussed. Xiao Ran, however, felt that perhaps the evolutionary trait of beasts was their immense individual size. Therefore, as long as they had enough superpower energy to absorb, a beast could continuously grow larger, up to a certain limit. There had to be a limit. Otherwise, if one day one grew to be the size of the Earth, the image was just too beautiful to imagine. I'll go back to the first military region in a few days to see if they have any new discoveries, Xiao Ran planned. A night passed, and the apocalypse entered its 126th day. In the early morning, Xiao Ran was awakened by the roars of his two dogs. Expanding his spatial sense, a look of surprise appeared on his face. A group of people was approaching. Strangely, they weren't coming from the shore, but from the opposite direction. The direction of the sea. How odd. Xiao Ran looked more closely. There were 101 people in the group, both men and women, but the ratio was extremely skewed, with only 11 females. Regardless of gender, all of them were ability users. The strongest had a superpower level of about 7,000 units. The weakest, was around 200 units. This was an extremely powerful team. And they were all Jap devils. That's right. Although most of them were dressed ordinarily, indistinguishable from Chinese people if thrown into a crowd, 7 of them wore Japanese-style clothing. 2 of the women were even in kimonos, the hump-like things on their backs being far too conspicuous. Jap devils again. Damn it, why are they so persistent? But how did they come from the direction of the sea? Could it be? Xiao Ran was startled. Could they have come all the way from Japan? So arrogant. I haven't even gone to trample Rejang yet. And you've already come running? Still, it was a good thing they'd arrived a few days late. Otherwise, if they had joined forces with Oda Yuri, how powerful would that force have been? 7,000 units. A few days ago, that would have been the absolute, unrivaled power in High City. But now, they were just dishes to be served. With a thought, Xiao Ran's domain expanded, and he appeared outside the cruise ship. Beside him were 2 large dogs, comparable to tigers. Baozi affectionately rubbed against Xiao Ran's calf. It was a good thing Xiao Ran had been strengthened so many times. Otherwise, being rammed by such a behemoth would have likely shattered his leg. Let's go. Time to clean up some uninvited pests. Xiao Ran swung himself onto Baozi's back and gave a light pat. Baozi immediately shot forward. Baiyun followed closely behind. By now, the group of Jap devils had closed to about 2 kilometers. When Xiao Ran saw them with his own eyes, they were only about 5 kilometers from the cruise ship. Xiao Ran, knowing they were coming, was naturally not surprised. But it was a different story for the Jap devils. Seeing a person suddenly appear, riding a dog as large as a tiger, with another the same size in tow, they were all stunned. But after the shock, their faces showed delight. What did it mean to see someone walking over? They had reached the shore. Finally, after nearly 10 days at sea, they were finally going to make landfall. What was on shore? Food women. In their island nation, they had to maintain a sliver of restraint. But was that necessary in China? The Chinese weren't people, merely consumables. And consumables, well, you could play with them however you wanted. If they broke, you just threw them away and got a new one, right? Ono-kun, you speak Chinese. Go ask him what city in China we're in, a Jap devil said. He was the powerhouse with 7,000 units of superpower energy. Yes, sir. Another Jap devil immediately placed his hands at his sides, bowed slightly, and acknowledged the order. His name was Ono Yasuo. He wasn't very strong, with only about 300 units, but he was the only one among these Jap devils who could speak Chinese. He took a few steps forward and said in very awkward Chinese, "Are you Chinese?" "Oh, this one speaks Chinese." "That's great." Xiao Ran revealed a smile, but didn't pay him any mind. Since when did a Jap devil get to question him? He also took a few steps forward, bringing all the Jap devils into the range of his spatial domain. "That's good enough." Xiao Ran smiled. "You're all really unlucky to have run into me right after arriving in China. Haha, but this is for the best. It'll save you the trouble of burning, killing, and plundering. All right, no need for any last words. I wouldn't understand them anyway, nor do I want to hear them. China is not a place you can set foot in. Farewell, I won't see you off." Ono Yasuo was quite responsible, actually attempting a real-time translation. But his Chinese was mediocre at best, and his translation was halting. By the time Xiao Ran finished speaking, he had only translated about half of it. But even that half was enough to enrage these Jap devils. They all glared with angry eyes. The more hot-tempered ones had already activated their abilities, either transforming into men of fire or snow, or into bestial forms. "Die!" One Jap devil roared as he charged at Xiao Ran, a single horn growing from his head as he ran on all fours, looking very much like a rhinoceros. Xiao Ran snapped his fingers. Snap! The Jap devil immediately put on a performance of in-place disassembly. First, his limbs and head separated from his torso. Then, flesh and bone peeled apart, floating and spinning in the air. The most bizarre thing was that throughout the entire process, his two eyeballs were still rolling, and anyone could see the immense terror in his eyes. Indeed, such a scene would send chills down the spine of any onlooker. As the one being operated on, how could this Jap devil not be so terrified that his heart would leap out of his chest? Oh, his heart was already beating outside his body. Xiao Ran shook his head. "To think you Jap devils have red hearts too. That's not scientific." Baka, amidst countless roars of anger, a barrage of attacks flew toward him. Did Xiao Ran need to deal with them one by one? Wouldn't that be a waste of his superpower? He vanished from his spot and reappeared within the crowd of Jap devils. He gently patted the shoulder of a devil next to him. Instantly, the man's body disintegrated, turning into a large basketball. Terrifyingly, his face was still visible on the surface of the ball, his mouth open as if wanting to speak, but no sound came out. With only a mouth, his vocal cords, tongue, and the like had long been separated. How could he make a sound? "Here you go." Xiao Ran dribbled the ball and then threw it. It still needed a hoop. Xiao Ran looked at a third Jap devil, a woman in her 40s. Xiao Ran pressed down, and the woman became a basketball hoop. These successive scenes made the Jap devil's hair stand on end. Damn it. Their own country was dangerous enough. Otherwise, they wouldn't have fled, but how did this Chinese person feel even more terrifying? To encounter such a person right after arriving in China. Just how many perverted powerhouses like this did all of China have? At this thought, they were terrified to their cores. We shouldn't have come. We shouldn't have come. But not all the Jap devils cowered. The 7,000-unit powerhouse roared, his entire body turning into blazing magma, transforming the surroundings into a sea of fire. In this state, would you still dare to lay a hand on him? The Jap devil swung his arms, and a large swath of magma fell like rain. Red Dog. Xiao Ran clenched his 5 fingers, and the Jap devil who had turned into magma was forcefully compressed into a fireball, which then rapidly solidified. Previously, it would have been very difficult for Xiao Ran to deal with an elementalized ability user, because the solidification process was slow. But now, he was at a level of nearly 50,000 units. This Jap devil was only at 7,000. They weren't even in the same league. How could it still be difficult? With a single thought, the Jap devil was solidified, and then there was no then. What was there to play around with when it came to Jap devils? A dead devil is a good devil. This was a principle Xiao Ran believed in. He grinned and looked at the other Jap devils. This time, without anyone needing to say a word, the Jap devils turned in unison and ran. A demon. This Chinese person was a demon, completely unbeatable. Forget it. When disaster strikes, even husband and wife must fly their separate ways. However, as soon as they started running, the Jap devils were horrified to find themselves running in place. How is that possible? No, it must be this Chinese person's trick. They all reacted, but what good was knowing? They couldn't fight, and they couldn't run. What could they do? Beg for mercy, of course. Many of the Jap devils knelt, their hands raised high, looking exactly like the devil soldiers captured by the 8th Route Army. Xiao Ran smiled faintly and murmured, "Too bad I'm not a soldier. I don't follow the don't kill prisoners nonsense. You all should hurry up and get reincarnated. If there really is a next life, don't be a Jap devil. Seriously." Bang, bang, bang. One by one, the Jap devils exploded, turning into balls of blood. Seeing this, the few Sakura girls shivered in fear, but they also began to quickly strip off their clothes. The two women in kimonos were especially fast, disrobing in an instant. "But, you're all too old. I can't bring myself to do it. How could I possibly bring myself to do it?" Xiao Ran seemed to be inspecting his troops. With a point of his finger or a slap of his palm, a Jap devil would disintegrate on the spot, transforming into various shapes, yet bizarrely, not a single one died. Finally, only Ono Yasuo remained. Xiao Ran smiled slightly and asked the Jap devil, "What do you think of my masterpieces?" Ono Yasuo's teeth were chattering, and he couldn't get a word out. A demon. This Chinese person was a demon. "I have some questions for you. Can you answer them properly?" Xiao Ran wore a gentle smile. But to Ono Yasuo, such a smile was like a demon's sinister grin. He quickly nodded. "Yes, no problem." He didn't want to end up like his companions. "You came for Japan?" Xiao Ran asked. "Yes. When did you leave?" 10 days ago. Didn't need to take that long. We couldn't get a precise location at sea. We went off course several times." Xiao Ran nodded. They certainly couldn't travel at night and had to rest, using the sun to navigate during the day. But the sun wasn't out every day. What would they do on a cloudy day? "What are you doing here anyway?" Xiao Ran continued to ask, patting Ono Yasuo's shoulder. "Don't you dare lie to me." Ono Yasuo was so frightened he almost fell to the ground, thinking his turn had finally come. When he realized he was fine, he let out a sigh of relief and quickly said, "We were attacked by a group of monsters and had to leave our homeland." "Oh," a thought struck Xiao Ran. "What kind of monsters?" Ono Yasuo explained with a mix of words and gestures, and it immediately dawned on Xiao Ran. Just as he thought, the giant beasts that attacked the 4th military region, 2 of them, were the very culprits that had wreaked havoc in Japan, forcing Ono Yasuo and his group to flee. And there were a total of 4 such giant beasts. Fortunately, there was only one supergiant beast that was 200 meters tall. The other 3 were small 50-meter tall ones. We split into 2 teams, one heading south and one north. Both had China as their destination, Ono Yasuo said, then revealed a bitter smile. Their team was truly unlucky. They had escaped the threat of the giant beasts only to run headfirst into the hands of this Chinese demon. So unlucky. Xiao Ran, however, was deep in thought. So, it turned out the giant beasts had come from Japan. Huh, did they drink nuclear wastewater? Otherwise, how could they have grown to such an exaggerated size? Ono Yasuo and his group had fled, but they hadn't realized that 2 of the monsters had also fled with them, and had even arrived in China before them, causing immense destruction and forcing the 4th military region to resort to nuclear weapons, taking the beasts down with them. Now, Xiao Ran actually felt a little regretful that the 2 monsters were dead. Otherwise, letting them meet Ono Yasuo's group would surely have been a nice surprise for the Jap devils. Forget it. It's better for the devils to die sooner rather than later. Xiao Ran had wanted to ask about the whereabouts of the other 2 giant beasts, but Ono Yasuo's group had fled in fear of them. Naturally, they thought all 4 beasts were still in Japan, unaware that 2 had come to China. How would they know where the other 2 had gone? The other group, how many are there, and how strong are they? Xiao Ran asked again. Ono Yasuo quickly answered, but he wasn't a high-ranking member of the group, so he wasn't particularly clear on the details. He only knew that the other group also had over 100 people, and their leader was as strong as their own leader, Mimura Shu. So also around 7,000 units. But your strength is a bit exaggerated. Xiao Ran asked again, having Ono Yasuo recount everything since the cataclysm began. But what Ono Yasuo said surprised Xiao Ran slightly. It turned out that although Ono Yasuo had killed ability users, it was only a mere 3. His strength was so high entirely because he had obtained a large amount of golden snowflakes on the way to China. It wasn't just him. The other Jap devils were the same, which had increased their overall strength by about 5 times. In just 10 days, their strength increased 5-fold? What the hell? Xiao Ran was speechless. He already knew that the chances of obtaining golden snowflakes were higher at sea, but he never thought it would be to such an exaggerated degree. If this group of Jap devils had been lost at sea for a few more days, would they all have become 100,000 unit powerhouses by the time they reached China? In that case, The strength of the other group of Jap devils was hard to estimate. It could be similar to this one, or weaker, but it could also be stronger. Why did these devils love to cause trouble so much? Couldn't you have just stayed quietly in Japan and waited for me to come and deal with you? Why run over here and stir up chaos? Xiao Ran continued to ask questions, wanting to get the most use out of him. Ono Yasuo said, "Actually, we were only active near Bansheng. We hadn't even gone to Red Jang or Kidiyamato before the 4 giant beasts appeared, forcing us to flee." Xiao Ran was somewhat surprised. He had thought these 2 groups of Jap devils were the elite forces of Japan, but it turned out they were just from a single city. True, Bansheng had a large population, but to be this strong was still remarkable. Golden snowflakes, they were truly a major variable. Xiao Ran asked again and again. After confirming there was nothing left to ask, he wiped out all the Jap devils. He stretched out his hand, and a ball of blood floated over. This was the strongest among the Jap devils, the one with 7,000 units of superpower energy. He tapped it lightly, and a warm current washed over him. Nice! Xiao Ran was just about to call Su Qingmei and the other women out. This was a huge harvest, and everyone could get a boost, but as he opened his mouth, he froze. Something's not right. He had used his spatial sense to confirm this Jap devil had 7,000 units of energy, but the boost he received was only about 300. Although it wasn't a huge difference, less was still less. Could his spatial sense be malfunctioning? That's impossible. The range of his spatial sense hadn't expanded further, but it was developing in the direction of finer detail. Therefore, his judgment of superpower levels should be more accurate than before, not worse. How was it short 700 units? Did the dog eat it? Xiao Ran glanced at Bowsy, who looked back at him with innocent eyes. It probably wasn't Bowsy. It hadn't touched the Jap devils at all. Could it be? Xiao Ran couldn't help but think of what Cheng Yao had said back in Starfire City. His prediction that one day, killing ability users would no longer yield superpower energy. Was this situation really happening? It just wasn't an all-or-nothing change, but a continuous discount? Would it eventually be discounted to 0? Let's try again. Xiao Ran tapped another devil's corpse. A warm current flowed in, and he savored it carefully. This Jap devil's superpower level should be around 500 units. Give or take 10. The amount Xiao Ran absorbed was 450 units. It really was a discount. A 10% discount. Xiao Ran frowned. Was this good news or bad news? If mutual killing among ability users could no longer yield superpower energy, then this would undoubtedly promote friendly relations among them. Otherwise, you couldn't even sleep soundly at night. What if someone coveted your power? This would also stabilize the strength of the major factions and reduce conflict. Originally, a fight could be a winner-takes-all scenario, allowing one to become incredibly powerful overnight. This naturally drove various factions into fierce battles, no matter how devastating the losses. But this would no longer be the case. The result of a Pyrrhic victory would be getting easily wiped out by a third party. These were all beneficial for the unity of humanity and the reconstruction of order. The only drawback was that in the future, if one wanted to become stronger, they could only search for golden snowflakes. Xiao Ran shook his head, not wanting to think about it too much. He called Su Qingmei and the others out. With so much superpower energy, everyone could get a boost. Discovering so many dead bodies at their doorstep, Su Qingmei and the others were naturally shocked. They were even more surprised to learn that they were Jap devils. Xiao Ran distributed the power, ensuring everyone got a share, though the amounts varied. Then, everyone returned to the ship to wait for the side effects to kick in. Xiao Ran took stock. He had absorbed nearly 10,000 units of superpower energy, but still hadn't produced any new abilities. However, all his existing abilities had been enhanced to some extent. Spatial sense, needless to say, was still at a 10-kilometer radius, but its microscopic aspect had improved a bit more. Was it around 100 nanometers now? Xiao Ran found it a bit amusing. Was he manufacturing CPUs, now entering the 100 nanometer class? Spatial cut was still. Xiao Ran was stunned. The range of spatial cut had increased. It had been stuck at the limit of 100 meters for a long time, and he had thought it would only increase in intensity, not range. But now its maximum casting distance had actually increased. 117 meters. An increase of 17 meters. How odd. What about his other abilities? Banishment? It had changed, and it was a huge change. Its maximum distance went from 10 meters to 117 meters. The duration could probably be measured in days now. Xiao Ran hadn't tested its maximum duration yet. He'd have to try it when he had the chance. What about the spatial gate? With a thought, Xiao Ran released the spatial gate. Both its maximum size and casting distance had changed. The maximum size became 117 by 117 meters, and the maximum casting distance also soared, but it was also 117 meters. What the hell was with this strange number? This was good, very good. The farther the spatial gate could be opened, the better, as it undoubtedly increased Xiao Ran's attack range. Spatial compression? Xiao Ran had a feeling. As expected, 117 meters. Spatial exchange? 117 meters. Spatial shatter? A maximum of 117 meters. Spatial domain? Its radius was also 117 meters. So, everything had been standardized? Wait, the increases for the other abilities were not normal. Only one had a normal increase. The spatial domain. So, was it because the spatial domain's radius had exceeded 100 meters that it triggered a qualitative change in his other abilities? He would assume so for now. After a brief daze, Xiao Ran was naturally overjoyed. Abilities that had been stagnant for a long time had all improved simultaneously. This was great news. After dealing with the side effects, Xiao Ran began to think about serious matters. There was another group of Jap devils that had come to China. Of course, they might have encountered sea beasts on the way and been wiped out, or perhaps they had gotten severely off course and ended up on the Korean peninsula. But it was also possible they had successfully landed in China. How strong were they? The North used to have the 4th military region, but now they had used a nuclear bomb to take down the giant beasts with them. If a team of Jap devil ability users landed there, could the North withstand them? If this team of Jap devils reached the level of Ono Yasuo's group, they would be terrifying. Almost no one in China could stand against them. Look at Starfire City. The strongest, Chungyao, was only at a level of 1,000 units. Because they were soldiers, their duty was to protect Starfire City, not to go out and acquire superpower energy. On the contrary, the factions in the major cities were fiercely competitive, killing each other, which had produced many powerful individuals. I've got something to do again. Xiao Ran's eyes shone. Find this team of Jap devils and take them out. He opened his spatial domain, and with a teleport, he was already outside, his clothes automatically appearing on him. He was extremely satisfied with this. In the future, if he said someone's pants fell off, their pants would fall to the ground. Wouldn't that be an amazing trick? I can also speak things into existence. Wonderful. He headed towards Starfire City. About an hour later, he arrived. Ugh. He had just left yesterday, and he was back so soon. I missed you guys. Xiao Ran smiled, directly opened his spatial domain, and teleported into the technology department. The department where Zhu Qingxian was. Seeing Xiao Ran suddenly appear, everyone here was stunned. Only Zhu Qingxian was so scared she fell onto the ground, her face filled with terror. After 3 seconds, someone picked up a phone, opened an app, and said with a trembling voice, "Captain Chung, come quick, something's happened." Xiao Ran smiled. "Let me invite them over for you. By the way, are you calling for the big Chung or the little Chung?" "Forget it. That's not important. I'll invite them both." Coincidentally, both Chung brothers were within 117 meters. In the next instant, Chung Yao and Chung Shun abruptly appeared in the room. One was still in the middle of pulling up his pants, while the other had a cigarette dangling from his lips. Xiao Ran. Chung Shun let out a roar like thunder. He had just finished using the toilet, but his pants weren't even pulled up yet when he was teleported, and in front of so many people, many of whom were women. It was over. He was absolutely socially dead. Xiao Ran laughed heartily. This person was in a hurry to find you. The needs of the people are your mission. Don't tell me you were done. Even if you were halfway through, you have to respond to the call. Chung Shun was so angry he rolled his eyes but said nothing more. What could he say? He was weaker. No matter what he said, it would be just empty words. Chung Yao was much calmer. He actually finished his cigarette in a few puffs and said, "What are you doing here again?" "Oh, I have information on those giant beasts." Xiao Ran smiled. "Wanting to share?" "Speak," Chung Yao said bluntly, not showing the slightest bit of fear. A man can be killed, but not humiliated. He wasn't afraid of death, so why should he grovel before Xiao Ran? Xiao Ran naturally wouldn't haggle with a block of iron. He wasn't here to fool around and waste time either. Those 2 giant beasts came from Japan. Xiao Ran stated his conclusion first, then explained the details one by one. Hearing that there were still 2 more giant beasts, everyone was shocked. But fortunately, these 2 were likely still in Japan, and even if they had left, they probably wouldn't all come to China, would they? They could just as easily go east, north, or south. Xiao Ran then said to Chung Yao with a serious expression, "There's another group of devils that has come to China, but we don't know where they are, whether they've landed, or if they've suffered any losses at sea. You have satellites, so help me look for them. Contact me when you find them. You have my number. It was the same number Zhu Qingxian had dialed before. He had long since retrieved his phone, but had just kept it in his alternate space to avoid revealing his whereabouts. Before Cheng Yao could say anything, Xiao Ran teleported away, leaving a group of people dumbfounded. TSK, this trick was really cool for showing off. Xiao Ran traveled north along the coastline, searching for any traces that the Jap devils might have landed. But it was very difficult. The devils were on foot, and the snow had now hardened into ice, making it extremely hard to leave footprints. Snowflakes fell from time to time, covering any footprints that might have been there, destroying all clues. What to do? The coastline was so long, and it was unlikely the devils would be so conveniently located on the coast for Xiao Ran to bump into them. What were the odds of something like that happening twice in a row? Since it was hard for Xiao Ran to search alone, he should get everyone involved. Starfire City could control satellites, giving them a huge surveillance area. If anything major happened anywhere, they would know quickly. After they fed him the information, he could rush over immediately. Xiao Ran believed that when it came to a matter of national importance, Cheng Yao wouldn't throw a tantrum or act petty with him. He continued north, but he wasn't just looking for traces of the Jap devils. He was also searching for resources. Under the thick snow, there were still many shops and gas stations. Since he was already here, why should he waste the opportunity? Besides, the chances of him finding the devils by searching alone were extremely small. He wasn't even sure if they had truly arrived. Might as well treat it as a stroll. It was now incredibly easy for Xiao Ran to collect supplies. He just had to open his spatial domain, and all the items would fly into his spatial gate. Unlike before, when he had to use spatial exchange one item at a time, or enter the store himself and touch things. He didn't feel that with great power came great responsibility, but rather that with great power came great satisfaction. Collecting as he went. His speed wasn't very fast. After searching for half a day, he decided he couldn't continue this blind search. If Starfire City couldn't find any trace of the devils, was he supposed to live like a wild man out here, searching forever? Even if he were to search, he had to find a more interesting way. Time to go home first. Xiao Ran looked at the massive pile of resources that had appeared in his alternate space and felt quite satisfied. At least the half day hadn't been wasted. He'd leave the task of finding the devils to Starfire City. Starting tomorrow, he would turn his attention to the sea. Firstly to search for golden snowflakes, and secondly to try his luck and see if he could encounter any ships transporting oil, natural gas, etc. Frozen on the ocean. Finding a ship like that, TSK, would be a huge score. 2 hours later, Xiao Ran returned to the cruise ship. Although the women knew he had gone out, they thought he was just restless and had been out fooling around for most of the day. They could never have guessed that he had gone to Starfire City again, traveled all the way to Lu Province, nearly reaching Luqing City, before turning back. After dinner, the women went about their own activities, working out, playing ball, doing yoga. Xiao Ran was about to read a novel for a while when he saw Yunwan Tong sneak in, looking a bit hesitant. He couldn't help but chuckle. "Teacher Yu, are you planning to ask me for some tutoring, a little private lesson?" Yunwan Tong gave a perfunctory, insincere smile. She walked over, looking like she wanted to say something but couldn't. "Sit. Why be so formal with me?" Xiao Ran smiled. Yunwan Tong rolled her eyes. "You only have one chair here." Xiao Ran grabbed her hand, pulled Teacher Yu into his arms, and then smiled. "All right, tell me, what's on your mind?" Yunwan Tong bit her lip, still hesitating. "What's so difficult?" Xiao Ran's hands were not idle. "Did the little green tea bully you?" "She doesn't have the ability to do that yet." Yunwan Tong smiled, hesitated again, and then looked like she was about to speak but stopped, just like before. Xiao Ran chuckled. When did Teacher Yu become so indecisive? He was genuinely curious. Teacher Yu had always been a very decisive person. Why had she suddenly become so hesitant? He didn't like this hesitant side of her. Yunwan Tong seemed to have made up her mind and said with a serious expression, "My period is late this month." Huh. Xiao Ran was first stunned, then shocked, and finally incredulous. He certainly knew what a missed period meant. Damn it, this was a big deal. "How many days late?" he asked. "Almost 10 days. Yunwan Tong frowned slightly, looking a bit worried, yet also a bit expectant. It was a very complicated expression. Was she really pregnant? Or was it an emotional or physical fluctuation that had delayed her period? That was also normal. Sometimes even eating cold food could affect the timing of a period. Xiao Ran also frowned. "Aren't you all taking the pill?" He liked the convenience and had confirmed it was safe, so they didn't use condoms. All the women were on birth control pills. Yun Wantong nodded. I take it every time, but I don't know why this happened. Xiao Ran didn't suspect Teacher Yu of lying to him. In theory, neither pills nor condoms were 100% safe. And Xiao Ran was startled. The pill could prevent pregnancy, but that was for ordinary people. Yun Wantong and the others were now ability users. Although it hadn't been long, it meant their bodies had been enhanced. Wouldn't their resistance to medication also increase dramatically? In that case, an accidental pregnancy was perfectly normal. In the end, who was to blame but himself for only caring about his own pleasure? If this was the case, then Yun Wantong was definitely not the only one. Is anyone else's period late? Xiao Ran asked. Yun Wantong shook her head. I don't know. I haven't told anyone about this. I hesitated for a long time before telling you. Xiao Ran, if I'm really pregnant, what should we do? Have a baby? Would Xiao Ran agree? But what about getting rid of it? She touched her belly. Even though she couldn't feel the new life at all, she still felt a surge of a mother's strength and resilience. She would choose to leave. She would never give up this new life. Xiao Ran pinched her chin. If you're pregnant, what else can we do? We'll have it, of course. Huh? Yun Wantong stared at Xiao Ran blankly, her face full of disbelief. This guy, who only ever cared about his own pleasure, was actually so responsible. She had already prepared herself to run away with the baby. Xiao Ran flicked her snow-white, jade-like forehead and chuckled. What's with that expression? In your heart, am I some kind of devil who can't even tolerate his own child? Yun Wantong gave an embarrassed laugh. She had indeed had such concerns. Xiao Ran shook his head. He really hadn't wanted children. The main reason being that bringing a new life into such an apocalyptic world would be too harsh for the child. Why bring them into the world just to suffer? But since it had already happened, could he really get rid of it? That was his child too. Besides, as his strength grew, he could absolutely provide his child with a future that wasn't too bad. If nothing else, they would never lack for resources. Most importantly, there were now golden snowflakes. Every child could be an ability user from birth, and ability users could at least survive in this world. Not only that, Starfire City was a microcosm of humanity. Although conditions were still tough, if things continued to develop this way, Starfire City would surely spark a prairie fire in the future. And with more such underground cities across the country, would the revival of humanity be far off? After all, while many modern devices had failed, humanity now possessed the great weapon of ability users, which could compensate for some of the losses from the cataclysm. Humanity had hope. In the future, Xiao Ran would definitely not grow old alone. So considering having children was perfectly reasonable. The child would not grow up in loneliness and despair. Xiao Ran pressed his cheek against Yun Wantong's small belly, listening for the stirrings of the small life. He was finally going to have his own child. His own. Yun Wantong first chuckled. It's not certain that I'm really pregnant yet, and even if I am, it's been less than a month. It would be a miracle if you could hear anything. In truth, Xiao Ran could use his enhanced spatial sense, but he felt he should preserve the sense of anticipation, waiting for the natural birth after 9 months to meet his child with his own eyes. So, unless something happened to Yun Wantong, he wouldn't use his spatial sense to check. He just smiled, wrapping his arms around Teacher Yu's still slender waist, gently caressing her. Yun Wantong also felt his tenderness, and she wrapped her arms around him, a sense of peace and joy rising in her heart, calm and fulfilling. It was an indescribable happiness. She truly wished this moment could last forever. Hey, I should ask the others if anyone else's period is late, Xiao Ran suddenly said with great excitement. Xiao Ran called all the women over and asked them if any of their periods were late. He didn't know until he asked, but the answer was a shock. There were actually 4 other women whose periods were delayed. Su Qingmei, Zhou Yunsu, Xia Chuqiu, and Han Yun. I am pregnant. Han Yun was the most incredulous of all. She stared blankly at her own belly, even touching it with her hand, her expression extremely complicated. I've always taken the pill, and the doctor said it would be very difficult for me to get pregnant. She couldn't believe it, yet her eyes were already shining with a maternal glow. What normal woman, upon reaching a certain age, wouldn't want to have a child of her own? In the past, you may have had a constitution that made it difficult to conceive, but things are different now, said Jiang Yuning. Our bodies have been enhanced so much now, especially this guy's. Even medicine can't kill his disgusting things. As she said this, her pretty face turned a little red, and she glanced at Xiao Ran. Haha, brother, I'm having your baby. The little green tea threw herself into Xiao Ran's arms. But after I get pregnant, I won't be able to be intimate with brother anymore. What a pity. The other women all rolled their eyes. You're pregnant, but you're worried about not being able to be intimate with a bad guy. You really never forget to act cute. You're the biggest green tea in the house. You really have a knack for it, we have to admit. Su Qingmei was also feeling the small life in her belly. But even though she was a physical type ability user with incredibly sharp senses, a fetus less than a month old hadn't even developed a heartbeat. How could she possibly sense it? She just wore an expression of pilgrimage, her hands moving back and forth over her belly. Xia Chuqiu pouted. Sigh, I'm just barely in my 20s, and I'm already going to be a mom. It's over. My figure's going to be ruined after the baby is born. She said this, but the expression on her face was clearly one of anticipation and happiness. The other women were a bit disappointed, besides those who were committed to being child-free. Who wouldn't want to have a child of their own? Seeing this, Xiao Ran smiled. From today on, no one needs to take the pill. If you get pregnant, have the baby. I can afford to raise them. Instantly, all the women cheered. Su Qingmei couldn't help but shake her head. She was one of the few clear-headed ones and knew that Xiao Ran was just buying their loyalty. Since there were already 5 pregnant, what difference would a few more make? Besides, the birth control pills were no longer reliable, and there would likely be more slip-ups in the future. But with Xiao Ran's words, look at how happy all the women were. This guy. However, she touched her belly, her face radiating maternal tenderness and light, filled with a deep sense of happiness. She glanced at Xiao Ran and sighed inwardly. Now, she would never be able to leave this man for the rest of her life. So be it. It seemed pretty good, actually. She smiled faintly, and no one knew the many thoughts that had passed through her mind in that short moment. Discovering that he was going to be a father, Xiao Ran's whole mindset changed. He decided to go to Starfire City again immediately. What for? To find obstetricians and nurses. Although Su Qingmei and the others were ability users, and their physical fitness was far superior to that of ordinary people, they were still pregnant women, no matter how strong. They needed professional care and monitoring throughout their pregnancies. If a problem really did arise, Xiao Ran could intervene immediately. Of course, it would be best if he wasn't needed at all. Besides doctors and nurses, nutrition also had to keep up. He couldn't let his children lose at the starting line. He had collected more than enough supplies. Even if he hadn't specifically prepared food for pregnant women, he still had relevant items, and quite a lot of them. And there are the golden snowflakes. If my children are born as ability users, they will naturally be able to face this harsh environment without fear. From tomorrow on, I will collect as many golden snowflakes as possible. If my children are born at a level of 100 or even 1,000 units, their vitality will be absolutely tenacious. He decided he would set out at dawn. The next morning, Xiao Ran's figure flickered and appeared outside the cruise ship, and then he started running. Right now, no mode of transportation was as useful as his own 2 legs, except for an airplane. Should I get a plane to play with? An hour later, Xiao Ran arrived at Starfire City. He knew the way well and went to the technology department first. How's it going? Have you found the Jap devils? Xiao Ran asked directly. Seeing him appear so abruptly, everyone was naturally startled. It was really hard to get used to, and Zhu Qingxian, as usual, fell to the ground, almost losing control of her bladder. She had developed a strong psychological trauma toward Xiao Ran. The director of the technology department, whose surname was Wang, said, "It's not that fast. Although there are over 100 Jap devils from a height of several million meters, they're as small as bacteria. It's not so easy to find them, and if they've already entered China, they could be hiding in any residential complex, and we'd never be able to find them. Once this group of Jap devils had landed, how could you tell from satellite images whether they were Chinese or Japanese?" This was a problem. Xiao Ran thought for a moment, then searched the coastal cities. If there's a large-scale battle anywhere, let me know immediately. Ordinary people fighting in a group wouldn't make much noise, but a battle between ability users was different. It could create a huge commotion. If Xiao Ran were to go all out, he could even cause near-devastating damage to a city in a short time. At his level, he could be called a human-shaped nuclear weapon. Okay, understood, Director Wang agreed. Firstly, Xiao Ran's strength was too great. Both Captain Cheng brothers and even the highest commander, Tang Fengyuan, had told him to cooperate with Xiao Ran at all costs. Secondly, the Jap devils were a common enemy of the Chinese people. Who would dare to be ambiguous on this matter? Xiao Ran winked at Zhu Qingxian, which almost made the poor girl, who had been holding it in, wet herself again. It's over. She would definitely have nightmares tonight. Xiao Ran went to find Mei Yuping. "Sister Mei," he said with a big smile, "I need a few people from you." Mei Yuping first gave a bitter smile and said, Little son, you really fooled me good. Xiao Ran laughed heartily. This Sister May was quite petty. She knew he was actually Xiao Ran, but she still deliberately called him little son, probably adding a Z in her heart. Sister May, aren't you afraid I'll retaliate? He said ominously. Mei Yuping looked completely unconcerned. What do I have to be afraid of? At worst, it's just this body. Xiao Ran was a bit speechless. Sister May, are you trying to sell yourself? All right, let's get down to business, he said with a serious tone. I want to recruit a few obstetric nurses and doctors. As for the compensation, 3 meals a day are included, with at least 1 meal having meat plus a serving of fruit. They can shower every day. Other than occasionally needing to check on the pregnant women, there's basically nothing else to do. They can watch movies, read novels, or whatever. Mei Yuping was stunned. After a moment, she said, how about I come with you too? Look, even though I'm 30, I can definitely still have kids. Stop. Xiao Ran quickly held up his hand. Only then did Mei Yuping laugh heartily. All right, I'll help you look. With the conditions you're offering, people will probably be fighting over it. But doctors and nurses are not hard to find. Finding ones specifically for obstetrics might not be a sure thing. By the way, only women, Xiao Ran emphasized. Don't go getting me a male obstetrician. I'm a very petty person. I might just kill him for silence later. All right, I got it, Mei Yuping said and swayed her hips as she left. She was in the logistics department, but also handled human resources. Most government employees now held multiple positions, squeezing out every bit of their potential, unlike the idle days of the past. Her efficiency was high. In less than half an hour, she returned with 2 people. Both were young women in their 20s. I couldn't find an obstetrician, only nurses, she told Xiao Ran. Xiao Ran nodded. Then, Sister May, please keep an eye out for me. If you find an obstetrician, let me know. This recruitment notice is valid long-term. Sure. Mei Yuping first agreed, then paused. Wait a minute, the one in your house isn't a sow. She's not going to keep having litters, is she? Sister, why are you so much like Sun Limin? You're a nice person, but you have one too many mouths. Xiao Ran then looked at the 2 women. My name is Xiao Ran. What are your names? Gu Meng. Rin Susu. Xiao Ran nodded. Have you 2 heard about the compensation from Sister May? Yes. Both women nodded, their faces filled with anticipation. In Starfire City, they were currently rationing everything. They only had 2 meals a day, and ordinary people could only eat meat once a week. The conditions were undeniably harsh, but there was no other way. They had to take it one step at a time. But at Xiao Ran's place, 3 meals a day, all you can eat, and even meat every day, not to mention extra benefits like showers and movies. All right, then let's go. Xiao Ran waved his hand. Wait. Mei Yuping quickly caught up and grabbed Xiao Ran's arm. I'm handing these people over to you, but you must not mistreat these young girls. Don't trick them into a life of hard labor. You're quite responsible. Don't worry. I'm a man of my word. Xiao Ran took the people back to the cruise ship. This was slow, because he was using a hovercraft. Its top speed was a limiting factor. And even if a wind-type ability user were on board to boost its power, Xiao Ran was afraid the speed would be too fast and the boat would capsize. Forget it, a little slower is fine. Over 300 kilometers, how long would the hovercraft take? More than 7 hours. Even though Xiao Ran had set out around 2 p.m., the sky was completely dark before they even reached Sioux City. A thick fog rolled in, and outside the boat, you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Gu Ming and Rin Susu, seeing Xiao Ran still piloting the boat, couldn't help but feel anxious. Don't you know that of the 1,000 roads, safety is the first? Driving in these conditions where you can't see anything, what if you hit something? Oh, you're an ability user, so it's fine even if you crash? Fine. But after a while of being worried, they found that the boat was still moving steadily, without a single collision, which, while shocking them, also made them suspect that Xiao Ran could see through such dense fog. But out of awe for Xiao Ran, they only suspected and didn't dare to ask. Another 2 hours later, the hovercraft finally returned to the cruise ship. Why did Xiao Ran travel by night? This way, even if Starfire City was watching him with satellites, once the sky darkened and the fog appeared, they could only sigh in frustration. Although he believed Starfire City wouldn't dare to do anything to him now, why take an unnecessary risk? People's hearts are not meant to be tested. He directly opened his domain, sent the 2 women onto the cruise ship, then put away the hovercraft and boarded the ship himself. The women were all waiting for Xiao Ran and were naturally relieved to see him return. Especially the 5 who were pregnant. Their reliance on Xiao Ran had deepened, and they felt empty when he was gone for half a day. When they saw Gu Meng and Rin Susu, the women were first a bit jealous. Oh, the women at home just got pregnant, and you're already out womanizing again? but your taste is a bit too poor. This figure. Then, they learned that the two women were obstetric nurses and that they had misunderstood Xiao Ran, and they felt rather embarrassed. Gu Ming and Rin Susu, on the other hand, were completely shocked. Heavens, these women are too beautiful. And how many are there? Nearly 30. Did you rob the harem of some business tycoon from before the cataclysm? Originally, the two women had some little ideas about maybe seducing Xiao Ran during their work to improve their benefits, but after seeing the quality of the beauties here, they no longer dare to have such thoughts. It was better to just honestly do their jobs. The women had been waiting for Xiao Ran to return, so they hadn't eaten dinner yet. Now that Xiao Ran was home, they naturally all had dinner together. Gu Ming and Rin Susu were not qualified to join them at the table. It wasn't that Xiao Ran was stingy with some food, but if you let them enjoy the best conditions from the start, could you still expect them to have any motivation? They would just slack off. Xiao Ran, as promised, gave them each a bento box. The portions were large and filling, and there was also a fat, large piece of braised pork, which was enough to make the two women's eyes light up and their mouths water. What more could you ask for? So delicious. Early in the morning, Xiao Ran headed towards the deep sea. His spatial sense was fully extended, scanning for golden snowflakes above and probing the situation in the sea below, lest a supergiant beast suddenly jump out without him knowing. After venturing more than 300 kilometers into the sea, he successfully obtained a golden snowflake. No, this should be described as a clump. It was really big. No wonder the Jap Devil's overall strength had increased by about 5 times in just 10 days on their way over. The superpower liquid here was indeed abundant. If I search here every day, won't I be able to rush to the 100,000 unit level soon? Xiao Ran was overjoyed. With his spatial sense, he was definitely the best person at finding golden snowflakes. Unless you're blessed by Lady Luck. Unfortunately, he didn't encounter any cargo ships, let alone one transporting energy. Next time I'll go in a different direction and constantly expand my search range. Xiao Ran returned to the cruise ship. This morning's trip was just a morning exercise. By this time, the women were all up. After breakfast, Gu Ming and Rin Susu began their duties, performing some simple checkups on the 5 pregnant women. In reality, being less than a month pregnant, as long as they avoided strenuous exercise, it was fine. And since they were ability users with strong physiques, they didn't have to worry too much even with some strenuous exercise. But now, each of them was like a glass doll, walking at a snail's pace. Xiao Ran didn't mind. Let them rest and nurture the pregnancy well. He practiced his abilities for a couple of hours, mainly forging his spatial gate. Although he made progress every day, it was very small. To shape the spatial gate into a sphere, at least a year. No rush, no rush. He had many tricks up his sleeve now, and the need for a spherical spatial gate wasn't particularly great. Haste makes waste. He was afraid of breaking the spatial gate, which would be a real disaster. Then, Xiao Ran went out again. He wanted to continue searching for golden snowflakes. After running for more than 200 kilometers, he actually found one. Although it wasn't as big as the one in the morning, it could still be described as a clump. The one in the morning was about 50 units, while this one was around 30. For him, even 100 units was very little. But for the vast majority of ability users, 100 units was an amount that absolutely could not be ignored. He continued forward, and as he walked, a look of surprise appeared on his face. A ship. Unfortunately, it was neither a cargo ship nor one carrying energy, but a passenger liner. A very large passenger liner, even larger than the one Xiao Ran was currently living on. He walked forward, and more of the passenger liner entered his perception. Empty. Such a large ship, and there were no living people on it? That made sense. It had been over 4 months since the cataclysm. The food would have been long gone, and without energy, who could have avoided freezing to death? But what about the bodies? Xiao Ran didn't see a single corpse. He went a little further, and there were living people. It was a small cabin, and inside, 7 people were crammed together. There were men, women, and even 2 foreigners, which surprised Xiao Ran quite a bit. These 7 people were all disheveled and so dirty that it was hard to see their true faces. And Xiao Ran didn't need to get close to smell them. He could imagine how strong their body odor was. He walked forward again and was stunned for a moment, because he saw a large fish wriggling towards the passenger liner. Underneath, he could vaguely see 2 legs moving. This wasn't a fish that had grown legs, but someone carrying the fish while walking, but the fish was too big and completely blocked the person. No matter, as long as it was within his spatial sense, he could see everything clearly. It was a young man, at most 20 years old, with a shifty look, as if he was afraid an enemy would suddenly pop out and attack him. Xiao Ran was slightly curious. He quietly appeared and stood in front of the young man. However, the young man was blocked by the large fish and obviously couldn't see him. He walked straight into him. Xiao Ran reached out and placed his hand on the fish, stopping it from hitting him. Huh? The young man was stunned. He pushed hard, but it didn't budge. He couldn't help but wonder what was going on. This isn't right. I haven't hit the ship yet. Why am I blocked? He finally put the large fish down. A living person. The young man was both shocked and delighted. You're a living person. Not something I imagined, right? Xiao Ran's face darkened. He almost punched him to let him feel the touch of a living person. Were you a passenger on the ship? He asked. The young man nodded and showed a bright smile. My name is Li Xiaoyang. I'm 22 years old. I just graduated from university, and my family rewarded me with this luxury cruise for half a month. I was even hoping for some romantic encounters, but instead I got stranded at sea and almost died. This person was quite frank. Without even being asked, he just blurted everything out. Of course, it was also possible that this person was a master of disguise. Xiao Ran smiled. My name is Sun Li Min. With Li Xiaoyang's age, he probably wouldn't call him little son, right? It should be safe. Brother Sun, how did you find this place? Li Xiaoyang was very curious. To be honest, I don't know how many times I wanted to leave this ghost ship, but I just couldn't do it. Xiao Ran was a bit surprised. You're an ability user. Even if you just picked a direction and kept walking, you should be able to reach the shore, right? And you shouldn't starve to death either. Li Xiaoyang shook his head. That's not the reason. Don't think I'm being superstitious when I say this, but I really think this ship is weird. Whenever I get too far from the ship, I'll unknowingly walk back. I'm already starting to think you're a psycho. Xiao Ran had scanned the ship with his spatial sense. There were only 7 people on it, and all 7 were ordinary people with no abilities. So how could they possibly influence his will and make him come back confused? By the way, Brother Sun, what did you say about an ability user? Li Xiaoyang's reaction seemed a bit slow. You mean, people like me are ability users? I thought I was the only one with special powers. He opened his mouth and spat a ball of fire at the large fish. But the temperature of the fire was clearly controlled. The fish soon gave off a roasted aroma, but wasn't burned to ashes. Did this person have no guile at all? Xiao Ran thought for a moment. Has anyone else come here before? Brother Sun, you're the first one. Li Xiaoyang seemed very excited. When I saw you just now, I thought it was another hallucination. Xiao Ran frowned slightly. You often have hallucinations? Yeah, Li Xiaoyang nodded. I often see people who aren't there. Day after day, I'm on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Xiao Ran knew that if a person lived alone for a long time, their mind would definitely have some problems. But this Li Xiaoyang shouldn't be alone, right? Weren't there still 7 people on the ship? Did he not know? Were those 7 people hiding from him? So, the real situation was that this guy really had some mental problems, had killed off the entire ship's occupants one by one, and now only 7 people were left, barely surviving, constantly hiding from him, not daring to show themselves. Xiao Ran took a look. This Li Xiaoyang was not strong at all, with only about 10 units of energy. If no other ability users had appeared on the ship, then his abilities should have all come from golden snowflakes. Golden snowflakes were more common at sea, so even if he just stayed on the ship every day, there was still a good chance he could get some superpower liquid. Brother Sun, let me treat you to some fish. Li Xiaoyang patted the large fish. Once we sprinkle some barbecue seasoning on it, it'll be incredibly fragrant. Xiao Ran thought for a moment and readily agreed. Sure. He followed Li Xiaoyang onto the ship. Both were ability users, agile and nimble, and they easily climbed onto the deck, entered the ship's cabin, and closed the door. Once the cold wind was blocked, the perceived temperature immediately rose by several degrees. Li Xiaoyang shivered and led Xiao Ran towards the interior of the ship. After walking for a long time, they stopped, and Li Xiaoyang began to bang on a pipe. There are a few other survivors here. I'll call them over to eat, Li Xiaoyang explained. This dispelled one of Xiao Ran's suspicions, that the 7 people on the ship were hiding from Li Xiaoyang, because he really did see the 7 hiding people come out and quickly arrive here, pushing the door open. But when they saw that besides Li Xiaoyang, there was a stranger in the room, all 7 of them showed surprise and fear. This is Brother Sun Li Min, Li Xiaoyang introduced. I just met him outside. Li Zi, he couldn't be. Among the 7, a slightly older man started to speak but then stopped, glanced at Xiao Ran, and quickly looked away. Li Xiaoyang laughed heartily. Brother Sun is definitely not a weirdness. You can all rest assured. That's not for sure. The 7 people looked at Xiao Ran with a gaze still full of apprehension. Xiao Ran became even more curious. What weirdness? Li Xiaoyang sighed. Didn't I tell you just now? No matter what, I can't get too far from this ship. But that's not the only strange thing. On the ship, we often see people who have disappeared or even died. Xiao Ran was surprised. If one person encountered this, it could very well be a hallucination. But all 8 of them? That was definitely not right. Now, all these people suspected him of being a weirdness? He suddenly found it interesting. Come on, let's eat grilled fish, Li Xiaoyang said, while skillfully cutting open the fish and cleaning it. The internal organs were discarded, the fatty parts were used for fuel to provide heat, and they only ate the meat. In addition, they also brought out canned vegetables. No wonder after 4 months, these people were still relatively healthy. Otherwise, without vegetables to supplement their vitamins, they would have long since gotten all sorts of diseases and would be close to death, if not already dead. The fish was big enough for everyone to get a sufficient amount of meat. They wouldn't starve, but the atmosphere was very oppressive. The only sound was chewing. No one spoke at all. But Xiao Ran was not such a quiet person. He began to ask Li Xiaoyang questions. Why were they hiding? Actually, they weren't hiding, but staying together, Li Xiaoyang said with a solemn expression. At the very beginning, when there were still a lot of us, someone who was alone had a very strange thing happen to them. He paused, as if with lingering fear, and then continued after a moment. He gouged out his own eyeballs. There were many similar incidents, Li Xiaoyang continued. Someone sawed off their own leg in front of everyone. Another person bit the necks of his wife and child to death, then leaped off the ship. He didn't even die from a fall. Instead, he came to his senses and cried and screamed for half a month before finally dying. Even Xiao Ran felt a chill run down his spine listening to this. So we stay together. It's so that if someone goes crazy or gets possessed, the others can stop them, Li Xiaoyang added. The room they were in before had no tools that could be used as weapons. Interesting, more and more interesting. Xiao Ran was certain that there was no 9th person on the ship, and Li Xiaoyang was a fire-type ability user. Such an ability user couldn't make people hallucinate or control their minds. So, what had happened to all those people who had died so bizarrely? Xiao Ran ate casually, but not a single bite of food entered his stomach. Instead, it was secretly sent to his alternate space. Could there be some neurotoxin in the food that affected judgment? It was better to be safe than sorry. As he ate, he asked questions. After the cataclysm, the large ship was forced to stop. At first, the captain was able to keep people calm, but after just 5 days, the order on the ship began to collapse, and vicious incidents became common. Murder, robbery, rape. About 10 days later, the strange things began to happen, which forced the fragmented people to reorganize and fight against the unseen, mysterious enemy together. But it was useless. People continued to die in all sorts of bizarre ways. When only the last 10 were left, they gathered in that small cabin, trying their best to prevent any more deaths. This was indeed effective. In the last month, only 2 people had died. Before, more than 2 would die in a single day. Besides Li Xiaoyang, the remaining 7 were Han Mingjie, the oldest, whose origin was unknown and who had a habit of adding Z after people's names. He was 45 years old. There were also Zhao Yaoqing, Peng Bin, Ma Su, and Kai Lan. Kai Lan was one of the 2 women, around 30 years old, and was Ma Su's wife. The other 2 were foreigners, also a couple. The man was 33, and the woman was 29, but in their current state, it was impossible to tell if they were attractive or not. Sun Zi. Han Mingjie had just opened his mouth when he gave an embarrassed smile. Sorry, I'm just used to calling people that. I didn't mean to take advantage of you. Xiao Ran felt very disheartened. Did the name Sun Li mean carry some kind of curse? He had used it twice, and each time he was subjected to some kind of innuendo. Little son, how did you get here? Han Mingjie still asked. The others also looked over, even the 2 foreigners, because they could actually speak Chinese. Xiao Ran smiled. I was looking for golden snowflakes, and somehow ended up here. Everyone was surprised to hear this. Putting aside what golden snowflakes were, how could you have traveled so far all alone? Li Xiaoyang, on the other hand, let out an "oh" and took the initiative to explain for Xiao Ran. Brother Sun is a superpower user like me, and to become a superpower user, you need to absorb the energy from golden snowflakes. Didn't you ask me how I could breathe fire? I told you I encountered a field of golden snowflakes, and you didn't believe me. All right, everyone nodded. Now, they had no choice but to believe it. Are you sure you can't leave this ship? Xiao Ran was full of curiosity. This time, everyone shook their heads in unison. We can't. As soon as we get off the ship, we'll mysteriously come back after a while, they said in one voice. Xiao Ran patted Li Xiaoyang's shoulder. Let's give it a try. Huh. Li Xiaoyang was first stunned, then shook his head. No. If you try to leave and then mysteriously come back, your head will ache like it's splitting. It's incredibly uncomfortable, as if someone is punishing you, and you won't dare to leave again. It's fine, don't worry, I'm here. Xiao Ran smiled, and without giving Li Xiaoyang a chance to refuse, lifted him up. Li Xiaoyang struggled with all his might, but it was useless. He could only be carried out by Xiao Ran. The others looked at each other, none daring to move. Outside the ship, Xiao Ran put Li Xiaoyang down. Let's go. Li Xiaoyang sighed helplessly. Brother son, your curiosity is going to get me killed. I said don't worry. Xiao Ran smiled. What could Li Xiaoyang do? He couldn't resist, so he could only walk forward. After 1 kilometer, nothing happened. After 2 kilometers, still nothing. Xiao Ran was starting to think that Li Xiaoyang had deliberately made up a story. But when they reached the 3-kilometer mark, Li Xiaoyang's footsteps suddenly halted, and then he turned around and started walking back towards the passenger liner. Just as Xiao Ran was about to stop him, he saw that Li Xiaoyang's eyes were dull. No, his pupils were almost invisible, only a hazy white, which looked a bit scary. Interesting. Xiao Ran had his spatial sense open the whole time. He was 100% sure that within a 10-kilometer radius, there were only him and the 8 people on the passenger liner. The seabed? There were indeed some fish and shrimp, but they were all very ordinary, probably belonging to the 10% that hadn't evolved. So, what was causing Li Xiaoyang to change like this? Xiao Ran wanted to act, but he froze. He didn't know what to do. No, didn't I think of what to do before I came out? How did I suddenly forget? No, I think I've lost my memory. What abilities do I have? Xiao Ran used a spatial cut. Not right. Spatial compression. Also not right. Spatial shatter. Still not right. Do I not have any other abilities? Xiao Ran let out a loud roar and fiercely bit his tongue. His mind instantly cleared. I remember. He used a banishment on himself, and his mind became completely clear. Before, his mind had felt like it was covered by a cloth. Now it was completely transparent. Unknowingly, he had been eroded by some kind of power his memory affected, and he had forgotten the banishment ability. No wonder Li Xiaoyang thought there was something weird here. Damn it, it really was very weird. He had actually fallen for it. If he hadn't, on a whim, brought Li Xiaoyang out to witness it for himself, then by tomorrow, would he have completely forgotten the banishment ability? No. Would his memories even be altered to the point where he didn't even know what he was supposed to be doing? Xiao Ran was alarmed. He had come out to search for golden snowflakes and maybe find some energy. How did he, after meeting this group of people, become so interested in some weirdness that he had to get to the bottom of it? Was he a very curious person? In other words, from the very beginning, his thoughts had been influenced and interfered with. Xiao Ran threw a banishment at Li Xiaoyang as well. Li Xiaoyang was first stunned, scratching his head, his eyes full of confusion. Then, his face lit up with excitement. I'm still outside. I'm still outside. He danced with his hands and feet.